Alright, so let's make sure this is going. It is. Alright, so welcome to Dante Alighieri's The Divine Comedy, Cantos 2 and 3. Unfortunately, we're running a little light on people this week. It seems that we only have Rich and Despy at the moment, with Eucharist potentially coming in later. But we're getting into one of the interesting portions of the beginning where not like we dealt with the animals, etc., but now we're actually starting to get into the mind of Dante, which will actually, I think, be very interesting to go over this week. Now, Rich, you wanted to kind of go over last week, and did you get a chance to break the canto down like you said you were going to? Just curious.
No, I haven't.
It's okay. My week was screwed up too, so like this is understandable.
Yeah. Yeah, but I do think that we've all had a time to meditate on that first canto, and you spend a lot of time on that first canto because it sort of introduces the whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I always think about the beasts throughout the play because I say play, yeah, throughout the poem because it seems like if we're supposed to if our entire experience is supposed to be set up with those beasts, then I'm always looking to see, you know, what is it foreshadowing? What is it on Earth that's happening that's relevant to these other three realms? That sort of thing. So I always, at any point, I'll probably be thinking of one of those three beasts at any point during the journey.
Well, I mean that's always
I don't know
interesting.
if it's supposed to foreshadow the whole comedy or if it's supposed to foreshadow what's coming up next, which is just the Inferno.
Well, see, for me, it's this because we know Dante and the way that he is writing these issues, that it is more than likely that he has multiple meanings like tied up with it his writing. And I think there's the three that he's talking about that are very much symbols of like the mortal sins and the holy virtues and all this. But he is also going to be drawing parallels each of those three beasts to each of those three popes as well. So like this is just as much commentary on the real world as it is on the afterlife, even now.
Well, I mean, and the other thing we were talking about before, like the live stream started, is there's also numerology inside this as well, and this is another like set of three. Like as we go through this, you're going to see that there's a lot of things that just deal with the number three. The interesting thing is if you want to call the first canto an introduction, and then the like canto 2 through 34 as like the main bit, you would say that there are 33 cantos for what is it, the Inferno. There are 33 cantos for Purgatorio, and there are 33 cantos for what is it, Paradise. So now you have the three beasts. I think this is this aspect of numerology as well inside of like how Dante is like building this out.
Yeah, and it's a different realm too, right? Because Canto 1, he's still on Earth.
Yep.
He's still like with the living,
right.
which is makes it not part of the Inferno. It is right. Funny. You just read the Inferno by itself; it will include Canto 1, but really, you're not in Inferno yet. Like it's almost as if you should have 4 books, and the first book is a really tiny one. Like it is
right. Canto. Well, no, because Canto 1, it is the transition. Because like this is passing from the earthly to the unearthly realms. Like there's a significance to this that it's never solely set on Earth. Never. It is always in that transitionary period. So to me, like that is where it is going to be talking about Earth. It's never truly set on Earth.
Yeah, and in a way, you're on Earth until you get to Paradise, right?
Mm-hmm. Well,
the Inferno is inside of the earth, and Purgatory is a mountain on the other side of the earth. So you're in different parts of you're ascending, well, you're descending and then ascending, but you don't act. There's something maybe, with Christianity, you're often you're told like not to be too attached to worldly things or to the world, and the only thing that's not attached to the world, in a literal sense, in this poem is paradise. So I guess starting with the earth and then going down and then going up, but you're still really haven't left. There's something worldly about both hell and purgatory. I think that's maybe why I find myself relating to the Inferno and Purgatorio more than I do Paradiso. Like, how many more choirs of angels on a cloud can I pay attention to? Yeah. Like, just Paradiso has always had that problem for me.
it did for the entire Christian world. That's why hell had to be invented.
That's why everybody reads the Inferno and then stops.
Well,
personally, I like Purgatorio best.
most
Yeah,
people don't
Purgatory
even,
is
yeah, most people don't even realize that it's the three books separated into one. So when they read Dante's Inferno, they don't realize they've missed 2/3 of the book.
yeah. Purgatory is more. I think is more of a fun read than than Inferno or Paradise.
They all have their purposes, so like I can't really do that like you guys can. Because like to me, the value of Paradise, as boring as it is that it's boring. This is Dante's, in my opinion. And by the way, very few scholars agree with me to whoever's watching, so take this with a grain of salt. But there are scholars who agree with me. This is his condemnation of the church. This is them saying, him learning, mind you, according to the scholars that agree with me, that he basically had read that hell was invented by previous church scholars at this time who had talked about the fact that this had to be invented because heaven didn't seem realistic and people didn't buy a world that was perfect without this. They needed the counterbalance. And the church invented hell from scratch. And we know that part's actually true historically from Christianity. But I think, because like I said, there's a couple of scholars who agree with me, this is Dante realizing that and so using social commentary on it.
There was one point that I wanted to bring out that I forgot to bring out last time that just seemed like rather interesting to me is that you have like Virgil is basically guiding Dante through hell, through purgatory and heaven. And the one thing that stood out in my mind is that when talking about like Shintoism, when a person dies, when they go to like after they die and they pass to the afterlife, they're met with one of the gods called Omyo. And Omyo is they call it the immovable spirit, but his job is to basically give you the orientation of the underworld, or not the underworld, but the afterlife for 7 days. So he basically spends 7 days with you and explains to you exactly like how the afterlife works. Yeah. So I just thought that was a funny tidbit to add to this that like Virgil is kind of acting like this Omyo.
Are you familiar with, I'm sure you are. So the Kurosawa film, Akira? Well, yeah, I know I always pronounce it wrong. Yeah. But there's a character who is near death, right, where he's the main character, Mr. Watanabe. And he makes all these mistakes, his reaction to his mortality, because he like really hadn't considered it prior to getting stomach cancer. But one of the mistakes he makes is he accepts a Virgil-like guide who wants to give him a tour of, basically a tour of the underworld, right? But in this case, the underworld is all the like CD bars and like entertainment venues. I think in Tokyo. And It's interesting too, because part of that is the encroachment of Westernism, right? Because he starts partying with all of these sort of, one of the big tragedies in his life is that his son has westernized, no longer sleeps in on the floor on a Japanese bed, that sort of thing. And of course he starts embracing all of this. He starts partying in the West, listening to Western music, going to all of these places with these party girls, and it doesn't work. It ends up not being fulfilling for him. And so he ends up letting this Virgil character go. But I wonder how much of that is inspired by the story you just told.
Well,
about it sort of takes you on a tour.
Yeah, the only difference is like it's almost like this is that guy's job. Like it's like this is what the gods basically say. Hey, okay, this is your service that you need to do to people that are just going to the underworld. So I have a feeling that there are pamphlets, there's slideshows, there's a long-winded speech and probably a meeting that should have been an email.
Like a couple of the scholars, I forget the guy's name now, but actually think that there are portions that essentially Dante edited out because of like what the church may have done, because there are certain lines that Virgil says where he doesn't speak of just the one God. He doesn't speak of the Christian pantheos. He is speaking as if the other gods are real. And that's something that a lot of people forget, that for a very, very long time during the Christian faith, they accepted that other gods existed. It wasn't until later that it was, there's only one God and we must kill everything that says otherwise. They were like, no, your God's fucking wrong. We're going to kill you and your God can't stop us. They still believed you had a God. They just believed you was lesser.
You don't mean during Christianity. You mean during Judaism, right? Like
no, during Dante's lifetime. Early Christians accepted the existence of other gods.
Okay. Yeah. So when you say early Christians, you don't mean the church. You mean people who
the church
exist.
Church fathers have church fathers write about it in their writings. Like it was accepted. They were just lesser than.
Yeah, I'd have to see the context of that. I mean, I know certainly Genesis talks about other gods, and Genesis refers to gods in the plural, like Elohim is a plural. So there seems to clearly have been an assumption of polytheism in early Genesis. But then after that,
everything becomes all the way through 3rd century Christianity. They still find this because at this point,
I'd be interested to get some context on that.
Well, but the thing is like Augustine, that it becomes they were lesser than, they were small g gods, not big G gods. So it's their gods, but because he has no other word for what they are, essentially. Like they're not God, but they're gods.
The church approaches it that way now, in the sense that we refer to the gods as literary characters,
and that stems from Augustine. And furthermore, Basil the Great, Jerome, Cyril of Jerusalem. I've done more research into the Bible on this particular area of Dante than I did Dante.
Yeah, no, I believe you. I just don't know the context of. I don't know if polytheism is the right word, because if you're putting it into two tiers, I remember, of course,
it's not. They actually delineate. It is instead of multi-theism, because you have your God, they have their gods, no intermixing.
I mean, Moses does battle with another god, so they do exist in Genesis.
And there's another
but I'm not aware of
scripture that I forget, that I'm forgetting off the top of my head right now, where it says God goes to sit in judgment with the other gods. He actually goes to sit at the table with a bunch of other gods. Like that, there is I have to go find it again, but there's a particular scripture that says this, that gets cut out of the Protestant Bible, but is in our Bible as Catholics or former Catholic. Myself,
that would be Old Testament. Yeah, sure.
So
I mean, there's no New Testament
like Tobit, Judith.
I forget which
Maccabees,
one
Wisdom.
I think I think it was in Maccabees, but I'd have to go look it up because this is something I looked up like when we first started planning this. What was it, 6 months ago? And I'm like, yeah, because like the early church accepted this, but it was a tier system. There was hey, we got income. There was a tier system. There was God, big G. He is the power of all, and then there is the lesser false gods, because they call them false gods, but they still call them gods. Like they still give them that delineation because it's essentially the biblical version of Clarke's third law. These things are so powerful, we don't know what the hell they are. We're gonna call them gods because we don't have a word for it. They could have been fucking aliens, essentially. Like, not literally because they didn't have that concept, but you understand what I mean. Like, they're like, this isn't human, but we hold our God higher. It was like they were trying to make that separation.
I'm gonna find some glasses. I'm gonna look around.
Now, that being said, how's it going, Ancom? We haven't got started reading yet. We're just kind of talking about, like, Canto 1 and, like how this interacts. Because, like, at the time that Dante's writing, like, he's taking a lot of numerology. He is reading a lot of the old church doctors and church fathers and actually, like, has a slightly different and less favorable interpretation of the church because of the way that he does social commentary. And I was just bringing it up, like, this is the time period that in most of Christianity, worshiping another god was a death sentence, but they still believed that other gods existed.
Yeah, I don't think it ever actually says that that, you know, the God of Abraham was meant to be the only God. Like, he specifically said, you shall worship no other god before me. If no other gods existed, then why make that distinction? Yeah. Now, perhaps you could reinterpret it as you shall worship no other ideas before me, but that's not what it says. So, and like, we have fairly clear records from the Old Testament of other cultures that worshipped other gods, and the goal of the prophets was never to disprove these other gods existed, but to show that their god was more powerful.
Yes, and no, it was not Maccabees, it was Psalms. That line comes from. I had to go look up my notes real quick. It's Psalms that comes from. So like this is kind of where it comes from. That he is bringing in an educated, elevated commentary on a subject that he understands at, for his time period, an extremely refined level, second only to probably fucking clergy. Like we are talking somebody who has studied religion at such an extensive level that he could probably teach some of the clergy their jobs. Yeah. So it's like, and he is bringing like the nuanced character of these concepts into this, where he loves a pagan. The pagan references like comments to other gods, or at least lines that we think that are edited because of his reference to other gods that Dante had to remove later. At least from Virgil himself. Like, even if Dante never said it in the story, he may have had to remove it even from Virgil's mouth because of the political time period. And if that ends up being true, if the scholars that believe that are right, that means that Dante was even trying to point out that the church was hypocritical because originally they accepted other gods. The learned people knew that quote-unquote small g gods existed, but it was there could be only one God, and they literally ignore everything to the peasantry who have no education. Because one of the things about this really what it is an epic that Dante wrote is he is trying in vain, mind you, up until long after his death, but he's trying to bring this wisdom to the masses in a way that they can understand without having to do also years of study. And like that to me brings a different layer into where he puts the numerological symbolism within it, how he focuses on not just the divine numbers of 3 and 7, but the divine number of 8, the divine number of 16, so on and so forth, and how they correlate. Like it, which it becomes interesting to us now with our modern understanding. For him to have come to it in the 13th century, just like wild.
Mm-hmm.
Rich got his camera off.
Yeah, Ancom, before you got here, we were talking about how I think the thing that we all agreed on was that Scripture is polytheistic in early Genesis. Like the word Elohim, which is a word for God, is actually a plural word. There appear to be other gods that are competing against this one, and of course, at one point Moses throws his staff down, and turns into a snake, and it battles the other god. So there are other gods in early Genesis. I think everyone agrees on that. What comes as a surprise to me, although I'm open to the idea, is that that polytheism was still sanctioned by the church by the time of Christianity. Like I can't imagine Paul agreeing to any of this. But that doesn't mean it
just believed that this is, but
or
it's
assumed
wrong.
or right. But I'm open to it because I know there's a lot of diversity, especially in the early church, before everything goes top down. So I certainly, it's highly likely that pagans, once converted, would continue to believe in the pagan gods. They just become convinced that Yahweh is more powerful. But the idea that the church tolerates this or incorporates some of those assumptions into its own teaching, like that, I'd be a little surprised by that, but I'm, of course.
Okay, elaborate what you mean, because we know you and I have talked about this before. You and I know they incorporate certain things from other faiths directly into the religion to create an inculcation effect on the newly converted.
Enculturation, yeah. No, I agree. But that's different. Enculturation is when the church takes tradition from pagan culture and then rolls those traditions, basically what they call baptizes. You've probably heard that term used in that sense, especially, Sensei, I think you have. When you baptize something, you incorporate that belief into. You can baptize anything. You can baptize football and turn football into a religious Christian event.
No, I understand what you're saying, but what I'm trying to get at is that's now. When we look back through history, it wasn't just that. They actually brought in certain gods as spirits, where they would no longer call them gods, but they would refer to them as the spirit of a land, things like this. You were talking about culturally, it took for this to be cemented almost 1,000 years before all of this got removed.
I mean, you enculturate stuff until you become the biggest guy on the block. That's just kind of how religions work.
And because of the time period, travel times, generational rates, all that stuff, 1,000 years with all of those hindrances to quick progress. Yeah, that it took almost, I think it was 1,100 or so before it becomes cemented. Before then, read the church fathers from the 300 and 200s. This changes what is written dramatically. Even St. Augustine himself fucking talks about it in this way. Go back and reread City of God Against the Pagans. Like, he even uses this language. And that is considered one of the 4 great doctors of the church, even though there's like 30 of them. Rich and his coffee art.
All right, so should we get
yes,
should get into this?
Well, Rich, did you wanted to bring up something about last week? You had said so while we were talking afterwards. Do you remember what you wanted to talk about at the beginning before we get started reading?
No. Well, I think I said earlier I wanted to go over the beasts, but I didn't really have time to do the research I was going to do on that. So I think now that I have my coffee, I can keep my camera on. If you can tolerate a little bit of foam on my mustache.
You're fine.
Occasionally.
I'll do my best.
Oh, I still need my glasses though. See, I was distracted by coffee making. Should we start reading like maybe the first few lines of Canto 2? Or actually, since Ancom wasn't here, Ancom, you weren't here last week, were you?
I was not.
Yeah.
No, I didn't actually know about this until afterward, and then actually I forgot that that's what you guys were doing in here this morning, so that's why I jumped in.
Right. Yeah, we need to fix that so that people don't keep.
Well, no, I had
that happened last week.
No, I have already fixed it. He's been invited to join us.
Oh, right, he's just invited. Right, yeah. I got you. Yeah. Yeah. So I think probably maybe we can just give him a little recap of what happened in Canto 1 and where Dante is right now.
Okay.
He's still on Earth. He's not in hell yet.
He's in the transitional area. Is my argument, because my argument
he's lost
is
in the woods.
Well, but my argument is this metaphor is a symbolism, is that this never, not a single line of this entire epic, even in the first canto, technically happens on Earth. The first canto, to me, is the transition between life and death.
Okay, so in the first line, he's in the dark woods, which means we never really see him on the right road.
Yeah, he's closing his eyes. He's in the process of dying. This is like the quote unquote near death or death-like experience as he is going through is Sayers.
Even though, just to be clear, Sayers saying this metaphorically, but he's literally alive.
Yeah,
he's not. He's People comment on it continually throughout the poem. He's still alive.
He
doesn't belong there.
Yeah, he's alive through the entire poem. I'm talking like the symbolism of where Canto 1 is. It technically not a single line happens on Earth. And now, while Sayers disagrees with me, Longfellow agrees with me. Chiardi agrees with me on this one. And it seems to make more sense with the way he is so vivid in his prose.
Maybe explain to Ancom who Sayers is.
Okay, Dorothy Sayers is one of the commentators that we're using. We're pulling from a bunch of commentaries because this is a digital apparatus, Ancom, as I was telling you about last week when I invited you. So essentially we will be talking to university students or high school students, and if you're a high school student studying this, sorry for the bad language. But like it is, we'll
clean up our language in Paradise.
We are getting at the actual apparatus of it, where we're bringing a historical context for the specific reason, and where we will specifically point out where something is our opinion as opposed to scholarly opinion.
We've decided that we're going to use bad language all through hell, and then slowly use less through purgatory, and then by paradise we will stop using all bad language.
The two Catholics decided this. The pagan has protested.
Oh, I forgot. Like, Jack can only go a certain amount up Mount Purgatory, and then he must stop. He'll have to leave.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry. I'm that pagan that's going to kick in, and St. Peter going to have time keeping me out, because me and God.
Well, I know the other
words.
thing I wanted to talk about was the conversation that we had, but didn't come to a definitive conclusion on, with about Trajan. I know I told the story last week, but Trajan is an example of somebody who makes it. I believe he makes it to paradise. Even he doesn't just get to purgatory; like he makes it all the way to heaven, and he does so not on by virtue of somebody else praying for him, which we'll get there when we get there. But I think that sort of contradicts what I assumed, what I thought I was hearing from. I don't want to say it totally contradicts it, but I think it appears to contradict what we were hearing from Eucharist, because his argument was that Dante.
He got really triggered at that idea.
Well, of course, yeah. And of course, it's not like this isn't something that you're going to get, hear from a priest. But
not most of them.
I think it's important to think that this is called baptism by desire, right? The idea that you can want something bad enough that God will grant it.
Well, yes, but that is a harmonization.
Gregory the Great.
But that's a harmonization.
Really Can you imagine getting to the pearly gates and then seeing St. Peter there and just be like, "Hey, I got a +1. Can you open the gates, please?"
Well, I mean,
or somebody, imagine Ancom showing up at the pearly gates and going, "Oh crap, Christianity was real. I'm in trouble." And then Peter going, "Nope, you're good."
Ancom's a Christian. He's fine.
I can't vouch for you.
Yeah, Ancom's a Christian. He's fine.
Yeah. Oh, I thought he was more of a polytheistic kind of. Oh, okay.
Nope. He's just.
I heard you wrong the last time.
No, he's just an intellectually honest Christian, which is why he ends up siding with me in the apologetics arguments more than people like Phil.
Oh, fair enough. I knew he was a theist. I just didn't know. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. No. I'm a Christian. It's just I don't adhere to a lot of Christian doctrine in terms of, what modern interpretations of the Bible would often go toward. But yes, in terms of the basic ideas of Christianity, most of the ideas laid down at the Council of Nicaea, for instance, I tend to agree with.
Do you adhere to a particular denomination?
No.
Okay. You sound pretty close to me, actually. But I thought I thought I heard you saying something a little bit more polytheistic, or almost sort of agnostic in terms of which God you thought was.
Well, that's the thing. Is the best description I have found for myself is an agnostic Christian. So in many ways, I am very much agnostic. But
I surprised my bishop by telling him I was an agnostic Catholic, and he was very confused by that.
Well, but here's my thing. I don't even think agnostic is accurate for either of you, because
it's accurate for me. Because what I mean by agnostic is that I can't prove there's a God. I simply choose to believe, and therefore I don't know. And gnosis means knowledge. But I think the way you're right. I think the way Ancom's using it is not that definition.
Well, my argumentation is this, because both of you end up fitting into this. The correct adjective would be non-dogmatic.
Yeah.
Except, I do believe in dogma.
Yeah, but you do not adhere to the same dogmas. You are non-dogmatic. Well, you do believe in some of the dogma. You don't believe in all of it, so you are non-dogmatic.
Yeah, I believe in dogma in that there are principles in Christianity that you must believe or you're not a Christian. And I think that, for me, that's the gospel message just broadly. Right? I don't think you can say, fuck the poor, I'm getting mine, and be a Christian. I think that's dogmatic for me, because that's the sheep and the goats. We talked about that.
Yeah, but that's a dogma that you hold. that much of
Yes.
the early church...
Well, it's a dogma that I think is universal. Like, from my perspective, if you don't believe that, then you're not a Christian.
Yeah, but that is
so it's dogmatic.
That is your dogma, as opposed to...
No, you're right. You're right.
Dogma.
Like, maybe I'm wrong about it or something, but...
That's all I mean is, yes, you have some dogma.
I'm just saying that from my perspective, it's an absolute rule that applies to everyone. So I'm not saying, oh, everyone can be a Christian in their own way. I mean, to some degree, that's true. But there are certain things that you absolutely... Like you mentioned, Ancom, the Council of Nicaea. The Nicene Creed, to many Christians, is one of those things that you have to say every word of it and mean it, or you're not. You just don't fit the definition.
Yeah,
that's kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah, and that's part of why I mention the Council of Nicaea, because like that is, I don't have the same kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Unanimous agreement with the Nicene Creed that most would associate with Christianity, but like I would say the majority of the creed, at the very least, I agree with, and so by that token, I consider myself to be a Christian. Most others wouldn't, and honestly, I don't really care what others believe about my particular faith, because that's not how faith works. Even by most evangelical Christians, own profession, Christianity is meant to be a relationship between yourself and the triune God, and therefore anyone trying to measure or judge another's relationship with that God makes little to no sense.
Yeah, and this is why I say you guys would fit the definition of non-dogmatic Catholic, non-dogmatic Christian, respectively, because you do not adhere to the church dogmas, and I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that for both of you this is true, because I've talked to you for long enough. You guys hold to certain dogmatic beliefs that you yourself hold, but that is from your own more educated interpretation, mind you, than the majority, but your own interpretation of these scriptures and these practices and what going back and reading early church fathers and all this. You are essentially doing the work of creating a new Catholic and Christian denomination of one in and of itself.
All right, so who's reading first?
Yeah, now getting back to Dante.
I'm not going to read it at the beginning just because I'm still looking for my glasses, but I will be listening.
Okay.
I'm happy to start reading if y'all are...
Yeah, we're going to go up for the first three tercets because it stops naturally there, and it's a good point to stop. So we'll go through the first three tercets.
Sorry, you said a word there, tercets, that I'm not familiar with.
The three lines that are the cantos are broken.
The stanza, 3-line stanzas.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, hold on, where are you?
Like so tercet is like tertiary, meaning third.
Gotcha. Because I see, so I'm looking at Canto 2. I don't know if I'm probably not using the same source y'all are.
We're reading from Longfellow, but we're using fucking everything.
So day was departing.
Okay.
There's
looks like the version I found was Carrie. So
yeah, I just sent you the file. It's starts on page 19 of the file.
All right.
9 of the book.
Okay, yeah, this was separated very differently from the version I had found. Different translators, my guess.
Well, Longfellow reads easier, like it actually fits the English language, like phonetics easier, and like Sayers, Chiardi, and all these others, they go more into like trying to do like more exacting interpretations from the language, so it ends up reading different syllable length is slightly off, so on and so forth.
Gotcha.
All right, so. Yeah, and so you'll be stopping on here thy nobility shall be manifest. Will be where we're stopping for there.
All right.
Go ahead.
Day was departing, and the embrowned air released the animals that are on earth from their fatigues, and I, the only one, made myself ready to sustain the war, both of the way and likewise of the woe, which memory that errs not shall retrace. O Muses, O high genius, now assist me. O memory that didst write down what I saw, here thy nobility shall be manifest.
Okay, and the reason I stopped you here, not only because it fits naturally, but because here Dante brings in a fourth aspect, again creating another numerological fucking significance. He's bringing in a fourth aspect that most Christians today, most Catholics today, do not consider a actual, like, real entity. The Muses. This is something that in this time period, these were actual creatures like angels and demons. These had their own sentience, their own will, their own, actions, etc. And, like, to me, this is him saying that Virgil is his muse. Like, this was his in the context or in the writing version of to you, essentially. Since we know a lot of this is about his love of Virgil.
Even though in the first canto it's pretty clear that Virgil doesn't want to be seen in this way. Virgil himself, understands the flaw in Dante's thinking here.
Well, I don't think that's Dante in himself, because we know he didn't know Virgil.
I mean Dante the character, not
yeah, I know.
poet.
Well, but we have to always take both into account, since this is him writing about himself. And to me,
yeah, I know this is
him
in a way Dante criticizing himself for how he was back then.
Loving Virgil, yeah. But this is also, while I'm criticizing myself, this is still dedicated to you, my muse, my great genius. Because great genius appears nowhere else in this context except for towards to the Muses. But it's separated out as a singular entity. As far as I could research, I see nowhere else in the Catholic world this particular term is used. It's never used for God, it's never used for the Holy Spirit, Jesus, the Pope, nothing. So to me, this is...
What's the term?
Oh, high genius. I have the sneaky suspicion this is Dante's I love you ode to Virgil. This is his moniker, because every scholar I read has a different opinion of what this means, and they never have a context specific lexical example as to why they draw that comparison, because there is nowhere else this particular phrase is used as like a title.
There might be a little bit of a pun here too, right? High meaning with regards to this poem, the higher up you are, the closer you are to God, right? Mm-hmm. So of all the denizens of hell, Virgil is among the closest to God, because he's in that first level of hell, which we'll see later, which is still underground, but not nearly as deep underground as other places where we'll go. So he's relative to other denizens, he's high up. Right.
Well, limbo technically isn't underground. Like, they can still see the sky, they can still see the lights. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it's underground.
Well, it is under a surface. In other writings, not Dante, this is described as a secondary firmament under the earth where they can still see the sky. Essentially, it's like they're in like a watery prison that is dry. Like, they can still see, but they can't see. And you can't see.
Like when you can look, how people it's not a perfect analogy, but how you can be in somebody's basement and they'll have those little windows at the close to the ceiling, and you can still see the sky through those windows, but you're underground. But you're not very underground, I think, is the point. So he's high,
right?
Well,
and to the extent that he's not, like, even if you think, or especially if you think that he's level to the ground, then he's definitely higher up than all the other denizens.
Yeah, and essentially the way this is described would be like a clear firmament, and it's other scholars.
And they live in a castle, right? So that castle goes up. So maybe the top level of the castle is, level to the ground. I don't know.
Well, it could be, but again, I think we're giving too much literalness to something that is meant to be read on multiple levels of both literal, metaphysical, and physical. Like, you know, and
yeah, I'm just
emotional.
saying
Yeah.
this is one possible aspect.
Mhm.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, in this part, he may have focused more on high as in virtue, especially with what we know Virgil will say later on.
Yeah, of course. Oh, certainly. Yeah. Of course.
Okay.
Of course.
Now,
I'm just saying it also means something that he's like literally high.
Yeah, I actually read a master's thesis on this that tried to attribute that to drug use and this his hallucination, and I'm like, put the fucking bong down, dude.
Oh.
Like, honestly,
I doubt the word was used in that way. I mean, maybe it was. I'd have to look and see.
First time it appears like that is in the 1800s. Like it didn't get used like that until 19th century. So yeah, Virgil and Dante were long since dead.
And also, like, it would have to be used that way in Italian.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now going back to the reading, because this next part I think really kind of cements my opinion, and I think gives credence to that high genius is a title for Virgil. And I began, poet who guidest me, regard my manhood if it be sufficient, ere to the arduous past thou dost confide me. Thou sayest that a Sylvis the parent, while yet corruptible unto the world, immortal went, and was there bodily. But if their adversary of all evil was courteous, thinking of the high effect that issue would from him, and who, and what, to men of intellect unmet it seems not, for he was of great Rome, and of her empire, an imperial heaven of father chosen. I actually cannot find consensus on who he's referring to here. If he's referring to just the city or a specific leader of Rome. No, I can't find a consensus on who he's referring to here. So, from the panel, what would be your opinion thus far? Because at this point, he's introduced the four abstracts of the four beasts, representing the seven deadly sins and the seven virtues, and now he's represented introduced the Muses, and now he's bringing in Rome again, in a way that is no longer personal to Virgil.
And the footnotes I have here, it just says like, was it Aeneas, the founder of the Roman Empire, is like under the footnotes.
Well, but the thing is when they say that, that's one interpretation, and that is of Sylvis the parent, not when he actually starts talking about Rome. Rome is two sets down. So while I understand he's talking about Aeneas is talking about the corruptible and was there, talking about it in the past tense. This seems like he's talking about in the present tense of Rome, and so it seems like he's talking about somebody else without naming it.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, when reading through the commentaries, there's a lot of disagreement on this point as to whether or not talking about Aeneas, talking about a different leader, talking about one of the Caesars, so on and so forth. Rich, you're muted.
Oh, no, I wasn't saying anything. Sorry, I was just looking. I just remembered that I got the Sayers translation. I was just trying to look to see what was in her footnotes. The author of young Sylvius's birth, Aeneas, the allusion is to the sixth book of the Aeneid, which describes how Aeneas visits Hades and is told that he is to settle in Italy and so bring about the foundation of Rome. The seat of both empire and the papacy.
We'll see, but that's about Sylvis the parent.
So this is interesting.
Yeah.
This is interesting also for what we know about Dante's politics, right? Mm-hmm. So for him, the empire and the papacy should be separated. Like, we know this because of De Monarchia, and I'm sure we can hear more about that from Eucharist when he gets here. But the fact that Aeneas founds the city that will ultimately lead both of those concepts, the church and the state. We know where he'll go with that. in other works. It'd be interesting to
Well,
see.
but that's what I'm saying. I know
Because
what he talks about there, but who's he talking about now? Is he talking about the present leaders of Rome in the two tercets down? Because, like I said, the commentators don't agree, and I don't know who to agree with, because all of their evidence is circumstantial. It's all like, oh, well, he could mean this, and this is why I think he means this. But there's no connective tissue between what the commentators write about it and like what Dante actually would have meant. So I think this is one where we're going to have to keep interpreting until we find the potential right answer.
Right, and I think we have to constantly keep in mind that he's saying multiple things at once, right? So obviously, when he's talking about Aeneas, he means Rome, and when he means Rome, he means ancient Rome, which means Aeneas is Rome, but also the Rome that Virgil lived in, which was a very different sort of political environment and not mythological. But then he also means the Rome of his day, which includes the Pope and the politics that surround the papacy as well. I think it means all of those things when he says Rome.
Okay.
Like it's, I think in the
So you agree
in
with
the medieval
Chiardi
mind,
that it's all encompassing? Okay.
Yeah, it seems like because he uses the past to interpret the present, right, and to even prescribe for the future.
Well, yeah, I mean, the reason because Dante is so careful about his tenses, I'm like, the fact that he talks about it from past to present between those, to me, it seems to delineate that he's trying to demarcate a individual, whether it be the current leader of Rome, a pope, or on the theological side, or a current leader of Rome, a Caesar, on the other side of it. Like, I don't know which he means, and I can't find consensus. That's why I'm asking. You think, like Chiardi, that he just means the city, the concept of Rome. But
I don't ever think he just means a thing. Like, I think that
I mean just
is
in
like
this tercet.
a penumbra of meaning. Yeah, I'm saying there's a penumbra of meaning in each tercet, and this is one thing that it means, right? But that doesn't mean it doesn't like simultaneously also mean other things. Right, like I just said, like you've got Rome, by which he means the papacy, but you also have Rome, by which he means the state, the thing that Virgil would know Rome as being, and then the mythology behind it, right? Which would be Aeneas.
For me, when I read this before reading the commentaries on it, this meant the people. Now that could be my bias reading into it. But because it was, for he was of great Rome, the people of Rome, and of her empire, meaning also of the government. Like, he was trying to bring this as a adjective as opposed to adverbially to the individual that he is alluding to, as opposed to a place he is alluding to. Now, like I said, that could be my bias coming into it. Maybe ANCOM is about to get on me because I'm being too commie about it. But like, that's just how I read it, because when
too commie for a communist?
Well, he's an anarchist too. But the reason I say that is because this to me, when he says it like this later, he's talking about the people of Rome. And it just seems like this is that hanging a lantern on how he means it later as well. So
I also want to talk about some of the small things that he mentions, like in the second tercet, right? Now Muses, now high genius, do your part. Memory, faithful scrivener to the eyes. I like the idea that the eyes are dictating to the memory what it sees, and then the memory like writes it down. Scrivener to the eyes. I just like that as an image.
Yeah, it's a wonderful poetic vision of it, and in my opinion, also shows to Dante's understanding of humanity better than other people in general of his time, because he understood the memory was faulty as scriveners were faulty. That's why he called it a scrivener.
And this whole thing, by the way, it's an invocation to the Muses, right? So now Muses, high genius, do your part. So he's telling the Muses to access his memory. Or actually, no, he's telling the Muses to work in concert with his memory. So this is the Muses. So historically, like the Greeks believed that the Muses spoke the story to you in your ear, sort of how how Muhammad gets all of his words from the angel Gabriel, right? And then the Muses like speak through you. But here, this is slightly different than what the Greeks would say in the beginning of an epic poem. This invocation is asking for the Muses to help him, and it's also asking for his own memory to help him. So it's part inspiration and part like the function of his own mind.
Well, see,
so there's cooperation between the divine and the self, the mortal self, that he sees them both as virtuous and noble.
I mean, that is one of the interpretations. See, to me, like that seems like harmonization. Like that seems because of the way he writes this.
Right.
Harmonization's after the fact. It's not what he meant. It's what Sayers meant, as opposed to what Dante meant. For me, the way this is written, this is not that kind of virtue. This is him pointing to the errors of memory. You wrote it down, but he calls them scriveners, not scribes. Scriveners were the
faithful scriveners.
But
he's not saying that they are faithless. He's saying that faithful means true to the, like if you're writing something down faithfully, it means that you're writing down what was actually said.
Yes.
So I'm reading this. I found a place that has a parallel between Mendelbaum and Longfellow. Mendelbaum's gives me the impression that he's asking for help from the Muses to give him the words to describe what his memory does recall of these experiences, because the last line of that set is here in his translations, here shall your excellence reveal itself, which to me speaks to all three, the Muses, the high genius, which, if we're accepting that is a reference to Virgil, his mentor.
His personal muse.
Yes. Oh, okay.
Yeah, because he was in love with Virgil, but never met Virgil. They're separated by 2 centuries.
Okay.
Yeah, Virgil is presumably one of the Muses.
Okay. Oh, yeah. So he's speaking to the Muses generally. He's speaking to the specific muse that he seeks personally to help him write what his memory has written down for him. Not necessarily saying that his memory is infallible, and so in that way he's asking the Muses and Virgil to help him to not only supplement his memory, but then to take the images that are written in his mind and to put them to words in a poetic way, because there's a difference between simply describing what you remember and doing it in a way that can really convey the imagery, hence the common phrase, among writers, show, don't tell. And so that's what I interpret from this. As far as the previous question, I was trying to respond earlier, but I was muted and didn't realize. So reading it in Mendelbaum's translation, it does seem a little bit more clear that throughout those three... Sorry, what was the word again?
Tercets.
Throughout those 3 tercets, it does seem like Aeneas is the person to whom he's speaking. So just to read it in this other translation, just because it feels more clear here. You say that he who fathered Silvius, while he was still corruptible, had journeyed into the deathless world with his live body. For if the enemy of every evil was courteous to him, considering all he would cause and who and what he was, that does not seem incomprehensible, since in the Empyrean heaven he was chosen to father honored Rome and her empire. So that very much, to me, does seem to be a coherent thread of thought that is speaking of Aeneas.
Well, see, but the thing is the way that, and this is why a lot of people avoid metal bulb, because he tries to transpose a lot of this into his meaning, where he will actually transpose whole lines to a different point and reorder them from the way Dante wrote them to fit his interpretation. I don't know if he's right. I don't know if he's right, because there's a lot of people who like him, and a lot of people say avoid him like the plague. But like, a lot of people dislike this aspect because unless you know the original Italian or some of the, enough Latin to be able to kind of understand that there's some kind of mistake there, you wouldn't even realize that he's changing the order of certain lines, and he never explains that he's doing it.
That's fair.
He could be right, but that's what I'm saying. The way he separates it in the Longfellow interpretation and the Sayers interpretation, these are separate entities. But the way
I just want to add.
Right, go ahead.
I just want to add at the beginning of this invocation too, like, yeah, we had faithful scrivener to the eyes, but also in line 6 we have which memory shall record unfaltering. So he seems to have a lot of confidence in his memory.
I mean, I suppose, yet he calls it into question the rest of the book, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, if I was traveling through hell in kind of a fever dream, I mean, I'd ask the Muses for help too to try to explain this to people.
And it would also probably not be a very forgettable experience.
Right.
Well, yeah, but more kind of what I'm getting at is he was kind of pointing at the fallibility of memory, the failing of man, that it can't be done solely by this. That's why he has to appeal to abstract immortal. And that's,
but also, okay, this is an interesting sort of foreshadowing of what we'll find out about the noble poets anyway, because they have all of the virtues, right? They have all of the cardinal virtues, but all of the cardinal virtues, even if they're perfect, are not good enough to get you out of hell, right? So here it's the same way. He has an unfaltering memory that is also a faithful scrivener and is virtuous and artistic, all of these things, right? But that's still not enough, right? It's still not enough, and so you need the Muses.
And that's what.
So I think that's what it comes.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to.
His memory is more like the 4 cardinal virtues, and the Muses maybe are more like the holy virtues.
And that's kind of where I was getting at, is he's trying to point to the fallibility of memory, that it needs help, even with a faithful scrivener. Because why didn't he use the word scribe as he does elsewhere to denote somebody who creates a perfect interpretation?
Well, he does explain it, like in the next tercet. He says that it was wise surely to test my powers and weigh their worth. So even though he has an unfaltering memory, he still wants to question it, right? Because he wants to be as safe and as accurate as possible. Like, this is a strong invocation, right? Because he's saying, look, there's no flaw in my memory. However, I still need the help of the Muses to tell this story, because it is,
I think he's trying to point to his pride, unfaltering memory from a human.
Well, I think it's when
he points later to that impossibility of other humans. I think that's
this is just it.
This is an admonishment to himself of pride. That's how I think
that it's more that he's saying that it's not enough, right? So to be perfectly virtuous at the cardinal level is still not enough.
I don't think he would.
I think that's what it comes down to. Well, I don't think he I think that if he were to have a faltering, first of all, it would call the whole thing into question. A lot of more modern works do start with an unreliable narrator. Here, I think he wants to be seen as a reliable one.
Yes.
And so I think that's why he says all of these things. But I think that reliable narration, in order to be insured, requires more than just a perfect memory. It requires the Muses.
Well, no, that's the contradiction, and therein lies the pride that he is admonishing himself for. There is no perfect memory.
Maybe we'll see if we can find some textual evidence for that later.
I'm getting to that, because we will get to that, not today, but in later cantos. Because the whole thing is the whole claim of perfection that is a pride that he has to overcome. That his asking for help is the first step in doing so. But it is.
I'm just trying to rely on the text that's before us right now, because if he turns out to change his mind later on in the work, that'll be great. It'll be great to note that. At this point, he seems to think that his memory is perfect.
Well, I get what you're saying because you're talking about the character. We are talking about the author at this point, and you keep focusing on the character. This is an admonishment to himself.
Well, no, actually, at this point, it's not the character. At this point, he's telling us the story, right? So he is currently now telling the Muses, tell me about this, other version of me that's going to, like, my memory of that event. Keep in mind, all of this is a dream, right? He wakes up and he's telling us what happened in his dream. The Dante that's in his dream is the character. The Dante that's telling the story is the narrator. They're not quite the same.
But this is... Yes, but we are, again, you are now confining it strictly to the story as opposed to the author writing it.
Yeah, because I'm in the story.
Yeah, and I'm trying to point to something that the author is intending in the story that, as we know later on because of what he puts into it, basically the way that your interpretation would read to me is that he wrote this and then forgot about it and he changed his mind later. But when he wrote it in the beginning, this is specifically how he meant it, and he didn't change his mind until later. That does not meet up with what I know of Dante.
No, I'm saying I'm just trying to be a naive reader, right? I'm trying to take the text as it comes, and then when he does a turn, like you're predicting a turn, and I think it's good to predict that turn because when it comes, we can go, aha, that is the way he went, right? But I'm also trying to be like a naive reader and say, okay, at this point, this is what he's saying right now, and not, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get ahead of myself and say, oh, but later on this will happen.
Well, no, and that's why I'm doing it,
but I also want to kind of note.
But this is an apparatus.
Yes.
That's what I'm trying.
Well, no,
that's
I'm just taking it from the text itself.
I know, but that's why I'm bringing it up now is because it needs to be brought up for the people who are going to be watching this later. This isn't just we could bring it up later. That's going to be multiple weeks from now, multiple months from now, actually, by the time we get to those.
Yeah, I know. I'm
just
saying we can do both.
Yeah, and that's why I'm bringing it up, because the reason I read it is because this entire portion, the entirety of Inferno, is admonishments to himself as the author, writing through the eyes of the narrator and the character. He is admonishing and evaluating himself and the culture around him. And in this is him pointing to the pride, my perfect memory, but I still need the Muses' help. You're right on this. This is a virtue. But he also views it as an admonishment that he had to ask for that help because the line before, he's talking about his perfect memory. But even in that, he uses a very particular word choice of scrivener versus scribe, where scriveners were not considered to be perfect replicators, where scribes were. In the time period.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that's important, because he's a very learned man. He chooses his words very carefully. And so when he chooses a word that means somebody who's non-perfect and calls it perfect, to me that's a juxtaposition. If that makes sense. Almost like an oxymoronic juxtaposition to kind of show the mistake in his thinking.
Are you attributing this meaning to Dante or to
the author,
the translator?
The author himself.
Okay, so in the Italian, he uses the word scrivesti, which simply means someone who writes.
Yes,
so
it's scrivener. It's the etymology of the word scrivener, and that's why I'm using it, as opposed to scribe, the scribos, where it would actually be more like an ecclesiastical scribe, where perfect replication was the virtue at that point, and that's why I think it's important.
See, that's the weird thing to me, because scrivesti comes from the same Latin root of scribere.
Mm-hmm.
So
but
what I'm saying is I'm not sure
usage within Latin and Italian at the time. because scrivener and scribe were different. Scribes were creating perfect replications, replicating the art on each page, the exact even replicating ink stains on the page that were there from the previous people. They were trying to make it perfect, whereas scriveners were trying to make it beautiful. They were trying to make it presentable. They were the people who would write your letters. You broke up, Rich. Could you started over, Rich? Or you broke up? Could you start over, please?
Yeah. Also, like, it's interesting that
you're going full robot.
Perfect replication. So,
Rich, you're going full robot.
okay, hold on. Let me see.
If Daft Punk is looking for a backup person, you would be it.
Is it better?
Nope.
Yeah, and your video's frozen. Hold on, let me try something real quick.
There you go. I think you fixed it now.
Oh,
okay. All of a sudden, your video kicked back in. You must have had a download kick in and eat up your bandwidth or something, because you went full robot. Your video paused and So, would you please start over? Because I do want to hear what you were saying.
Because all I heard was harder, faster, better, stronger. So that's all I heard.
Just that you don't even necessarily have to be literate to be a good scribe or scrivener, because if you're trying to, it actually is less artful. The less you understand of what you're writing, the more that you'll just copy all of the shapes that you see, because you're not going to interpret meaning onto it. You're just copying shapes. So if you don't know, like if you can't read, you might be actually a better scribe.
Mm-hmm. Whereas scrivener,
because you're just literally writing down things that are being said.
Whereas scrivener would be somebody you would dictate to and would write your letter. So they would have to at least be semi-literate.
Yeah, but if you're a scrivener of the eyes specifically, then you're recording what you see, which is really what a scribe does.
But wouldn't that just be
goes from one page to the next?
Yeah, but wouldn't that be also a description of like a naturalist of writing down everything you see? Because not in the traditional way of naturalists like we use today, but in the way they would have used it of somebody who just like observed and like studied nature. Would that not also apply to that? If I'm wrong, please forgive me, because like it's just how I interpret it.
I would. Another thing I would think is that, like, what do we in the 21st century think of as faithful scriveners? Like a photograph or a video of something. We trust those things way more than we trust accounts by people of things. And so, I don't know, like like the scrivener of the eyes, like seeing is believing is one of the first things that comes up to me. There's something about the eyes that we find more believable than our other senses.
Yeah, don't trust your lying eyes, blah, 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 blah. Like, we've literally been dealing with this particular issue for millennia. I agree with you. That's why I was saying, like, to me, it was almost like that was him trying to say, describe it as is. Like, it was almost like asking a naturalist, describe it exactly as it was seen, before they had that word. Because
something tells me we're just going to do Canto 2 today.
No, we're gonna get through Canto 2 and 3 because we're gonna start moving now.
Okay.
Because like I think that gets to the point where now this starts moving a little bit quicker.
By the way, I'm just going to write down Invocation of the Muses, and we can refer to this part of it as that, because I think or just the Invocation.
Well, Invocation of Muses and Rome is how I would put it, because I think he tries to delineate between the two.
Well, he's evoking muses and memory, but yeah.
Music, memory, and Rome. Muses, memory, and Rome, not music. Just misspoke. Okay. Wait, I already read. So, Rich, would you like to start on To Which and What?
I'm sorry, what line was this?
You guys are...
I actually don't have Longfellow in front of me, so I'm going to read Sayers. Is it line 13?
Well, like Jack has Longfellow up, like on the
hold
on in the background.
Let me. Do you want to link it again? And that way I'll just click over there and read that.
Yeah, hold on. I can send it to you. Message.
I found that having paper in front of me is a little bit easier because I have so many different resources.
If I had to
I may
do
have to
that,
get
wouldn't
the
be
Longfellow translation on paper as well.
Yeah, if I had to do that, I wouldn't be able to keep up with everything else I have to fucking do. Like, I thought about that where I'm like going to be reading from the book, and I'm like, then I'm going to have to put the book down and freaking, it might lose the page, have to forget that. That's why I just have,
right.
Let's see, did it open up yet? The problem is my Sayers copy is 2.3 gig. It takes a while to open, so I don't keep it open.
So to Meta of Intellect, is that what you wanted me to read?
It was To Which and What. Hold on, where is it?
Oh, The Which and What. Okay. The Which and What, wishing to speak the truth, were stabilized in as the holy place, wherein sits the successor of the greatest Peter. Upon this journey, whence thou givest him vaunt, things did he hear, which the occasion were, both of his victory and papal mantle. Thither went afterwards the chosen vessel to bring back comfort, thence unto that faith, which of salvation's way is the beginning. Is that where you want me to stop?
No, we go one more, because I think that gets...
Okay. But I, why thither come, or who concedes it, I not Aeneas am, I am not Paul, nor I nor others think me worthy of it. Therefore, if I resign myself to come, I fear the coming may be ill-advised. Thou art wise, and knowest better than I speak.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, because I just wanted to finish his line. Because, like, this, this is him trying to, like, essentially finish his plea. And this is, like, the reason I wanted you to finish this is because I think this kind of, like, cements it that he is very much trying to elicit, like, all of these emotions from the reader. Was he confident? Was he overconfident? Was he proud? Was his memory right? Was he ill-advised? Was he wise? You know, like, because all of these are actually, like, juxtaposed into the way that it's worded. So it's essentially like him questioning himself through the way that Virgil and he speak.
Okay, so it's interesting. One of the things in here that strikes me right away is when he says, I am not Aeneas, which I think is interesting because this is, again, like showing the difference between the author and the character, right? So he writes about Aeneas, right? That's the main character of his book. But what he's saying is, when I talk about Aeneas, I'm not talking about myself. I haven't turned Aeneas into an autobiography. Like, there's a difference between the author and the character, even though, like, he's not the character of his own book the way Dante is. Still, I think there could be a little bit of an implication here that the author is not the subject.
And that's kind of what I was getting at, because it's all of these things. Because as we pointed out last week, this is social commentary as much as just fiction. Like the readers who would be reading this would be a revolutionary concept, almost taboo to think of in this way, because of particular dogmatic beliefs of the people in this area of the world at this particular time period. Like to think this would have almost been sacrilegious in certain respects to delineate a human into these finite points like this, as opposed to the divine self. I'd almost say it's psychological commentary as well as social commentary, because I think that was intentional dissonance that Dante was trying to create within the reader to make them think.
And again, like there's also sort of a contrast here. I am not Aeneas, and I am not Paul. Aeneas being sort of a pagan pinnacle of virtue, and Paul being a Christian one. And he is neither of those things.
Yeah, we can get into Paul another day when it's not about Dante.
Right. But clearly Dante admires Paul.
Oh, I know. I was just making a joke.
What do they mean by chosen vessel?
My particular
Thither went afterwards the chosen vessel to bring back comfort. thence onto that faith, which of salvation's way is the beginning.
The way I interpreted that was he afterwards the chosen vessel was Jesus. The like that's how I interpreted it when I read it, and there is no commentator on it. Just to be honest, at least in the ones I saw.
Oh well, there Sayers has an opinion on it. She says it's Paul, but so he mentions Paul afterwards, right? So that would be some evidence of it. But also, like, Paul is the vessel. You know, you are the rock, and upon this rock I build my church.
No, it's Peter, not Paul.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So why would... Well, he says that also to all of the apostles as well. He says it once to Paul, and then he says it again to all 12 of the apostles. So maybe that's part of the reason why he calls him a vessel. But his vision of hell is described in the 4th century apocryphal book known as the Apocalypse of Paul, which Dante had evidently read. There is probably also an allusion to 2 Corinthians 12. Let's see. Second. You guys can go. I'm going to look that up real quick.
Yeah, see, this is like... But the church is not built on men. Oh, go ahead, Dante. Or, sorry.
No, I just I'm just trying to draw a parallel here because I know what comes in the rest of the canto, and we're not going to get to it. I really wanted to get to it, but it's all good. The thing is when I was looking at this chosen vessel to bring back comfort thence onto that faith, I was wondering if that's actually Mary.
Well, if it's
because the thing is like I don't know if this was in the early church, but I know that in and around Dante's time is when like the veneration of Mary became like a really popular thing.
Yeah.
Well, and it would fit his obsession with Beatrice, for instance, who seems to be a Mary-like figure.
Right, and like my thing with this is that like to bring back comfort thence onto that faith, like. If anything, the what is it, the figure of the Virgin Mary is a symbol of comfort, like for like a majority of Catholics at the time.
Yeah.
So let's see.
That's kind of why I took it as the Jesus, the church, faith, and like I kind of took it as all encompassing rather than just Mary. But it'd be interesting if it just meant Mary.
Well, I just like chosen vessel in this case here is capitalized. And what is it? When we look at people that were actually made vessels, you have Peter, obviously, and then you also have Mary, who was a chosen vessel.
Yeah. Like I said, that could definitely be it. Although I think
she definitely was the chosen vessel.
If it's referencing 2 Corinthians,
like literally,
I have the sneaking suspicion it's not going to include Despy's interpretation of this with Corinthians. But I actually think Despy's may have more validity if we pull it up in Italian. You have it up, Adcom. What's it read in the Italian? I know you.
So the words, and I was just. Yeah, so the words I was actually trying to figure out the translation. So line 28 reads "Andovi poi lo vas delesione." Sorry, that the apostrophe words are tricky for me sometimes, but those last 2 words, "vas delesione," I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that would translate roughly to "selected vessel." More literally, the vessel that was selected.
Okay, here we go. So this is according to Sayers a reference to Acts 9:15. But the Lord said to him, "Go, for he is a chosen vessel of mine. He is a chosen vessel of mine to bear my name before Gentiles, kings, and the children of Israel." And that is apparently a reference to Paul in Acts. And then 2 Corinthians, which she says also might be a reference. "I know a man in Christ who was 14 years ago was caught up to the 3rd heaven. Whether it was in the body or out of the body, I do not know. God knows." Which is interesting that I wasn't aware that there was a 3rd heaven in Corinthians, but there it is. But also, like, yeah. So if Paul is literally called the chosen vessel in Acts, I can see why Sayers thought that that's what this was a reference to.
It might be.
But I do think Mary is also a good candidate.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, chosen vessel, and then bringing back comfort onto that faith, just because like the main thing is I know in the early church Mary wasn't as venerated as she was later.
That came
Right.
so much later. Yeah, like, God, we're gonna have to start doing. What's another good day of the week for you? And what time? We may have to start doing like religious history too while we're doing this.
Okay.
Because like some of this stuff, it's like you're right. We're not going to get to Canto 3, but it's like I'm sitting there going, Jesus, like we have to add so much because I know most of the people studying this do not have the secondary religious class, the secondary history class that is also giving them all the information they need at the same time, because most schools don't set up classes like that. Like, you don't end up getting all the information as you need it. You end up like having to piece it together later, which sucks.
The reason I think it makes sense for Paul is because he talks about Peter's heir in 22, so he at least references Peter at some point. Then he mentions the chosen vessel, and then afterwards he's like, because he mentions Aeneas during the invocation, right? So he talks about Aeneas for a bunch. Then he talks about the person that he's referring to as a chosen vessel, right? And then later on he says, but I am not Aeneas, and I am not Paul. So it makes sense to think that the two figures he was talking about before were Aeneas and Paul.
Yeah, I mean, it could.
Right. Like he says, I'm mentioning these two people, but by the way, I'm not mentioning them because I think I'm comparable to them. You know, I'm just bringing them up for these other reasons. So I think probably, although the Mary thing like makes total sense, I think given the context of the text, I think it's got to be Paul that he's talking.
Yeah, and I mean, there may be like the secondary subtext that Dante is implying, especially considering the way he is doing like multiple levels of commentary. He may be implying like, hey, you know, this is changing and it's changing the faith, and it kind of shows, you know, that there's more to this, and he's bringing that in. But yeah, like it does make sense because of the rest of the context. It could be all of it or none of it, because like the other way that he words this is, you know, this is Virgil speaking. So, like, quite literally, like, a vast majority of what is being said, even by this virtuous pagan, could be wrong. Could be, like, not a lie, but just could be incorrect, is another aspect of it, which is something that would have been viewed possible of virtuous pagans very, very easily. Of not necessarily lying, but being wrong because you believe wrong. All right. Anybody else want to add more before we move on?
No, I think that's it. I think that's the main thing here is just to figure out who it is he's talking about in these lines. Do we want to go to the next?
Yeah, you want to go in, Colin?
I haven't even read yet.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
we
get going. We do need to like put a freaking marker up.
Yeah. Where do you want me to end at?
God damn it! Don't open up that recorder.
At the first moment when I grieve for thee.
No,
maybe end with 42.
I don't have numbers in front of me.
Then there's a quote after that.
Yeah, I was going to say, and just before the quote, "O spirit courteous of Mantua."
What?
It's a very beginning of page 11 on the Longfellow is the last two lines of that tercet. You get one line.
Oh, okay.
So the last line would be with voice angelical in her own language.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. And as he is, who unwills that he willed, and by new thoughts doth his intention change, so that from his design he quite withdraws. Such I became upon that dark hillside, because in thinking I consumed the emprise. which was very prompt in the beginning. If I have well thy language understood, replied that shade of the magnanimous, thy soul attained is with cowardice, which many times a man encumbers so, in turns him back from honored enterprise, as false sight doth a beast when he is shy, that thou mayest free thee from this apprehension. I'll tell thee why I came, and what I heard. At the first moment when I grieved for thee, among those was I who are in suspense, and a fair saintly lady called to me. In such wise I besought her to command me. Her eyes were shining brighter than the star. And she began to say, gentle and low, with a voice angelic in her own language.
And see, this is where I kind of think that it may be actually pointing to, like, your interpretation, Despy. I didn't read it as that the first time because the way that I read this, because of, like, the way I know that they gendered this, like, I always read this as the Holy Spirit. So, like, but it may be right that it may be Mary. Because, like, yeah, that could definitely be it.
Well, but also, I mean, this is Beatrice, right? Beatrice's first appearance, right?
Well, and as we said multiple
times, who we're talking about.
Dante multi-layers this thing like it's Damascus steel. Like it's just the way he writes. It's the way most.
Yeah, there's definitely Marian implications.
Yeah. To
Beatrice, there's no question.
Isn't she like directly referenced like later on?
Yes, multiple times.
Yeah, she will be. Yeah.
No, I meant like later on in this canto.
In this canto, yeah. I think he's introducing her here.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, now this is going to be Virgil going back into his speech, and like as we got into like he for some reason focuses heavily on Virgil's ethnicity, and I don't understand the significance, and again, the commentators disagree on the significance as to why this focus seems to go on. Is it just a delineator of this is the person that I'm trying to speak to, and it's a delineator, or is it they are trying to indicate some kind of like a secondary perspective that is valuable? Commentators disagree, but like as we get into Virgil's next line, it gets very in my opinion, very socially condemning, while essentially being in 13th century snarky in the way that Virgil words this. To me, this is Virgil, like kind of almost feeling Dante is misguided for viewing him with such veneration.
See, go ahead. I was just gonna say, I just go by like how like the text where like the capitalizations are and whatnot. Like lady is capitalized, and in almost every context inside Catholicism, whenever lady is capitalized, it's a direct reference to Mary.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what lady it is.
It's interesting because looking at the Italian, the words which are capitalized in the various English translations are not capitalized in the Italian, which I find very odd to say the least, because that capitalization definitely implies added meaning where it did not exist in the original text.
Well, but let's just look at the literal level really quickly. Yeah. Like, literally what's happened is Beatrice has come to Virgil and has asked him to go talk to Dante, to intervene with Dante. Like, that's what's happening here. Mm-hmm. Like, there are a lot of other layers to this where Beatrice obviously invokes Mary in some way. But literally what's happening is Beatrice is talking to, at this point, has descended to hell to go pluck Virgil out and ask him to go guide Dante through hell. That's what's happening.
Yeah.
At the literal level.
Yes, and that is important because, again, this draws the journey visualization and commentary of this. This is not a answer; it is a journey to answers and questions.
And when people talk about Catholics, like praying to the saints, what they mean is that Catholics will often ask saints to intervene for them, right? And in this case, it's a saint asking somebody in hell to do the intervention. So this is a very sort of unusual, it's kind of a reversal as to what normally happens, right? It's a damned soul. It's almost, I suppose maybe it reminds me of A Christmas Carol, where it's a damned soul that wants to save Scrooge's soul. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, it just seems to me like depending on what level of hell that you're in determines the amount of force that's needed to get somebody to do something for you. Because they're in limbo right now, there isn't a lot of force needed.
Right, because these are characters who have a lot of good in them, just not quite enough. Yeah.
Right, but I mean, like I know we'll get into this. Like, the further you go down, you're going to see there's a lot more force that needs to be applied.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Getting cooperation from some of those lower level denizens is not so easy, but Virgil is willing to do it.
Yeah. Okay, so.
But interestingly, God does not directly talk to Virgil, or for that matter, directly go to Dante, right? Like all these intermediaries, which is a very Catholic thing. Mm-hmm. Virgil is an intermediary to Beatrice, and Beatrice is herself an intermediary to God. So you've got all of these people in between Dante and God who are sort of helping guide him through all these different places.
This is like getting an apartment in Japan all over, going through like 3 to 5 different people, trying to get to the right person to get you to show you your apartment. Man, I'm telling you.
Well,
makes sense.
Well, make that 2 extra shows that we're gonna have to do, because we'll also have to get into the fact that no person has actually heard the voice of God. They've heard the voice of Metatron, but we can get into that another time. We can get into the voice of God Angel another day.
So I'm sorry, did you get to the part where he says that he feared that he has risen too late? Did you get to that part, or is that still to come?
I think it's still to come.
It's a little annoying that the numbers aren't in there, but I'm talking about 64.
Yeah, because we're going through 2 different translations. It's the way that this.
I'm going to print out some stuff for the next time, so it just makes it easier.
Yeah, true.
But at some point, he says that he's afraid that he's arrived too late. So Beatrice comes down and says, "Hey, you've got to go save my friend Dante, who's like lost in the woods," and then he is afraid that he's too deep into the woods, that he's too lost, that it's already too late.
Yeah, we're about, what is it, 3 tear sets away from that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, we're
not there yet. Okay.
So like we'll just get through this quote a little quicker. O spirit courteous of Mantua, of whom the fame still in the world endures, and shall endure, long lasting as the world, a friend of mine and not the friend of fortune, upon the desert slope is so impeded upon his way that he is turned through terror, and may, I fear, already be lost, that I too late have risen of the succor from that which I have heard him in heaven. Bestir thee now, and with thy speech ornate, and with what needful is for his release, assist him so that I may be consoled. Beatrice am I, who do bid thee go. I come from there where I would fain return. Love moved me, which compelleth me to speak. When I shall be in the presence of my Lord, full often will I praise thee unto him. Then paused she, and thereafter I began. like this is like as she's going through it, like now this is Virgil's reply. Sorry, I did get ahead of myself when I said that. This is Beatrice's comment and then Virgil's reply. Like as it gets into Virgil's reply, it's getting into what Rich is bringing up here. And
one more thing, just because we're there, but I'm not going to say much about it. I just wanted to point it out. This tercet I'm talking about, love moved me from, in this translation, love moved me from the blissful place, that blissful place being somewhere in paradise. And what's interesting is it just always reminds me of Plato's cave, that once you descend and you go into the light, your next duty is to go back into the cave and save others from the cave. And it seems like that's what Beatrice is doing. She's going, she's made it to heaven. She's like in the blissful place where always everything's happy. But because of her love for Dante, presumably she's talking about her love for Dante, but that's debatable. She's willing to descend from heaven in order to guide him up, and that's always reminded me of Plato's cave.
And hand out a few +1s while she's there.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. I mean, look, if Gregory can get a pagan into heaven, then so can Beatrice.
Well, and from the commentary, real quick, Beatrice Potionare, Dante's first love, the inspiration of his song, and in his mind, the symbol of the divine. He says of her in the Vita Nuova, this most gentle lady of whom there has been discourse in what precedes, reached such favor among the people that when she passed along the way, persons ran to see her, which gave me wonderful delight. And when she was near anyone, such modesty took possession in his heart that he did not dare to raise his eyes or return her salutation. And to this, should anyone doubt it, many, as having experience, could bear witness for me. She, crowned and clothed with humility, took her away, displaying no pride in the which she saw and heard. Many, when she had passed, said, "This is not a woman, rather she is one of the most beautiful angels of heaven." Others said, "She is a miracle, blessed be the Lord who can perform such a marvel." I say that she showed herself so gentle and so full of all beauties that those who looked upon her felt within themselves a pure, sweet delight, such as they could not tell from words. C.E. Norton, The New Life. This is like going into the history, like bringing back that, like going back to the original point of like his love for Virgil and why he has shame for it, because this was his first love, and he loved somebody that was so virtuous they were unattainable.
Also, Charles Williams commented here at one point, one of the Inklings, Beatrice has to ask Virgil to go. She cannot command him, though she puts her trust in his fair speech. Religion itself cannot order poetry about, and the grand arts are wholly autonomous.
Nice. I like that.
If we read on further, what is it? And I don't know if I'll have to go before then, but it is my belief that it isn't Beatrix that is specifically asking. It's actually Mary asking Beatrix to ask, what is it, Virgil to go for Dante. Because I don't know about you, but there's like from what I know about like with like paradise and how like Catholics like view paradise, usually you're sent to do something by somebody that's a higher up. You don't just kind of descend yourself down there to do something. Usually somebody sends you.
So it does say, like Beatrice does say that it's love that sent her there, right? Like it was because of love that she did it. So maybe love is personified by Mary, although that's just implied, not stated, right? Like that love, like Mary is love in that interpretation.
And I mean, we do have that obscure Catholic sect that believe that Jesus ascended to the right hand, Mary ascended and took the position of the Holy Spirit. So, like, there's even interpretations from this time period in the 13th century where certain Catholics believe that. So,
she didn't ascend; she was assumed.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I forget the weird.
There is a big distinction. There is a big distinction.
I'm a little. What was the word? She assumed.
She was assumed. The assumption of Mary. So Jesus ascended to heaven. The assumption is actually The assumption is how Mary got to heaven. And basically, it's a holy day of obligation, if I'm not mistaken, isn't it? Like the Assumption of Mary. Mm-hmm. It's like in August, if I'm not mistaken.
That's the
August or
problem.
September.
It's a feast day, yes.
Yeah, it's one of the holy day of obligation.
Yeah, I'm having a little trouble understanding the language there because, like,
Jesus was ascended bodily; she was taken spiritually, essentially.
Well, no, she was taken bodily. She was taken bodily as well. Here's the thing. The Catholics believe in the Immaculate Conception. And the Immaculate Conception is the conception of Mary, not the conception of Jesus. In other words, in order for her to bear Jesus, there must not be any sin in her. So she was born without sin. In other words, she was born not inheriting original sin. And therefore, she was without sin. And because death is a consequence of sin, Mary could not die. So, at the end of what would be the end of her life, instead she's just taken up bodily into heaven. That's a consequence of the. I thought they left the body, took the spirit. That could be just my misunderstanding. No. They take her bodily up into heaven. This is one of the two infallible papal statements that have ever been made in all of history. One of them is this: that she was taken bodily up into heaven. Well, you must believe this to be Catholic. That makes her third to do so after Enoch and Jesus. So Yeah, right. She's not the first to be taken bodily into heaven. Yeah, for sure.
Sorry, I just had to bring up Enoch since the Catholics don't like Enoch.
Fourth, because shoot, who was it? Not Isaiah. It was a different prophet.
Ezekiel.
There was another. No, it wasn't even Ezekiel. Shoot.
There are multiple Old Testament characters who are worthy enough through the way they live their lives to get into heaven.
Enoch went to heaven and came back. He basically got a couple of day pass and went up there.
I was thinking back. Elijah.
Oh, Elijah.
Okay. Elijah was said to have been taken bodily into heaven.
Yeah. He was given the rights to go to the buffet, but wasn't allowed to have a room.
For those students who will be watching this, what we are referencing here are certain apocryphal texts that are not actually accepted and were denounced out of the Bible during that lovely Council of Nicaea we were bringing up earlier, which is why we need a damn religious history class on this now.
Yeah, of course.
Because
this is what Eucharist is good for. Maybe he'll show up soon.
Yeah. Like when you get into this, a lot of these practices that we believe today, this is how the church has always been. No, it hasn't. like originally there was 88 books in the Bible, and then through multiple councils and treaties, it got cut down to 73 books of the Bible. Then during the Protestant Reformation, it got cut down to 66 books of the Bible. There's others, but these are the primary delineations for those watching.
Interestingly, the Eastern Orthodox are shielded from this because they believe that a church council can only happen if Rome is present, and Rome hasn't been to one of those Eastern Orthodox church councils in 1,200 years. And so the Eastern Orthodoxy has not been able to hold a church council, which means they haven't been able to change any of their teachings for 1,200 years. So if you want a denomination that is as close to the early church as possible, that has changed the least, those would be good candidates because they literally cannot change their teachings.
I'm glad you said change the
least. Not until Rome returns.
I'm glad you said change the least because I'm like, they've changed a lot in 1,200 years. It just hasn't been because of councils.
Yeah, but like you're not going to see anything major happening, like changing the number of
No,
books in the Bible or something like that.
No, but
you're not going to have. They can't have their own Vatican II. They can't do any of that
what I find funny though is they don't hold
unless Rome returns.
But they don't hold to the number of books that were in the Bible at the time when that separation happened, which was 81, not 73. So they had to have changed over time to the 73 book anyways. Like, I don't know how they changed it. Like, I don't understand the Eastern Orthodoxy enough to say, like, how they got around that. But, like, otherwise they would still be holding the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible of 81 books, which came in the same time period.
Well, no, because, like, what is it? Like, the extra books in the Bible, like the books that weren't taken out by the Protestants, okay, they were not actually. Well, the deuterocanonical
Right.
books, like they were not like what was it, like before the Council of Trent, which was in the 1500s. It's like 1580, something like that, and basically before that time. These books were kind of like optional books to read from. Like they weren't necessarily like things that like people said like this is 100% like you have to believe this like whatsoever. This was kind of like, extra source material. The Council of Trent is what made those part of canon. Like you can't separate these like from the rest of the rest of the books in the Bible.
Yeah, and First and Second Council of Nicaea, Treaty of Invocation, like there's dozens of these that have changed it throughout time, and that's why I was bringing up like if it hadn't changed in 1200 years as they claim, they would still be using the 81 book Bible, like the
I'm just saying like
do because they have the same issue that the Eastern Orthodoxy do of not being able to change without the presence of Rome.
No, I'm just saying what I'm trying to get at is like those extra books like Maccabees, Tobit, what is it, Esther, Judith, all of these books like that weren't books that you necessarily had to have to interpret what is it, the Catholic religion. So they could have used them, they could have not used them, and it would have been totally fine. It isn't until the Council of Trent in what is it, the 1500s, where they literally made them a staple of the Catholic Church. Like papal scholars had been writing about them for like centuries before the Council of Trent, but they weren't necessarily made that you had to use these. And because there was controversy because of like, well, they were written in like 3rd century BC Greek at the time, which was the issue. So it was like these people use it, these people don't use it. It's okay.
Yeah,
that was just kind of the feeling.
Yeah, we'd have to get into that because it's like some of them were used, some of them weren't. It got argued about over for about 200 years.
It was regional, like really regional, like who used them.
Yeah, and it laterally, some of them became apocryphal for political reasons. That's why I say we need a whole class on that. We'll be here for 4 more hours just on this one point.
Right. And with that, I do need to go. But before I go, I want to say that the next part that we're about to read here is what I would say deals a lot more with Mary than it does Beatrix.
Yeah.
So,
do you want to point out to which line you're talking about?
What is it? Well, you said, hey, you have, O Lady of Virtue.
Yeah.
Thou alone, through whom the human race exceedeth all contained. I mean, you can't get closer to Mary than that. First of all,
like I said, when I read it, I hadn't saw that interpretation, but the second you said it, I'm like, that kind of fits.
So grateful unto me is thy commandment to obey, if 'twere already done were late. No further needest thou, to thy wish.
Yeah. Like I said,
to me, honestly, this is just basically Mary telling Beatrix, "We got some shit to do. Get down to Limbo. Tell Virgil tell Virgil that I kindly ask him to do this one little favor for me."
Yeah, my interpretation is a little bit different. I don't see Mary at the literal level, although I certainly think Beatrice is like a Marian figure throughout. And so I think that it's Beatrice's love for Dante that's motivating her to do this. And to the extent that she does that, she's being very Marian in nature. I certainly do see Mary at a metaphorical level here, but at a literal level, I still think it's. I just think that because she's a denizen of heaven, from Virgil's perspective, she rises above anything that's ever been in his experience, right? Because he hasn't really experienced the divine, doesn't understand the divine. So as far as he's concerned, she might as well be Mary, right? Because she is like so excellent in virtue compared to him from his point of view. She's noble and she's much higher than anyone on earth would be, and certainly anyone in limbo.
Well, I mean, Mary does work through people like a lot. I mean, you have what is it, Fatima?
No, I would leave the door open to that.
What is it, Guadalupe? Anytime. You have what is it? Which one am I missing? Fatima's with the 3 kids, right?
Yep, she appears to.
What's the Saint Bernadette?
There's 22 Fatima miracles. Like that's why I always hate like the.
Yeah, there's one other one that I'm missing.
The one that most.
But that'll involve Mary.
the one that most people refer to as the miracle of Fatima is the one that supposedly hundreds of people saw and the sun dancing through the sky and shit. The 3 girls. Yeah. I forget the name of that particular miracle, but it's called something else.
Right. No, the the thing is that when they were confirming that miracle, if I remember correctly from when I was in school, it was the faithful are the ones that saw the sun dance, but the people that weren't part of the faithful did not see the same miracle.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and this is a complete shot in the dark, but Beatrice, coming from the Latin Beatrix, meaning blessed one in the feminine, may not be intended necessarily as a proper name, but as a reference to it being. Oh, okay.
Yeah, because
there is a historical person. Beatrice. She died very young.
Oh,
okay. And apparently, Dante, the historical Dante, was sort of obsessed with her. It's a little bit creepy because he was a lot older than she was.
Yeah.
But but I think she dies unmarried and before she had a time to have a relationship or whatever.
That's why
so in his mind, she's still pristine, virginal, which of course is Marian again, and all of these things. But he assigns a certain wisdom to her that historically she wasn't likely to have. Right.
All right. I got a dip. I will talk to you all later.
See you
all right.
Take care.
Thanks for coming by.
Have a good day.
So he sees all this beauty in her, right? So that beauty has a kind of a virtue. And then he sort of interprets that beauty as also having all of these other virtues, which is something that poets do quite often, is associate beauty with truth.
Yeah, I put it in the side chat for you. That's the person that is, from the baptismal record that individually speaking of. It could be, as we are pointing out, he multi-layers all of this. It could be he's meaning both, but she wasn't actually named this. So even if he is also implying that level of meaning to it, basically he's saying it was a divinely inspired name because this was also her name. Is how I would interpret that, because it could be from the blessed one of the feminine, within that, but that was also her name. She was also named the blessed one.
Yeah. So the idea I was getting at is basically that this was just a different way of referring to Mary, because she says. Beatrice am I, who do bid thee go. So, if that's not necessarily a proper noun, but simply a description, a title of sorts, then it could be directly referring to Mary. However, I did not know about
Well,
the
that's what I'm saying. It could be both
the-
because of the way he
the literal-
multi-layers it. Yeah, you
Dante's
may
a
be
bit
right.
of a
okay.
creepy old man. Let me just put it that way.
Well, yeah.
I mean, this is what 13th century. Pretty much, they were all creepy old men. Let's be real here.
that's right.
Well, not all.
It was
but
normalized for sure.
Yeah, like that's why like when like I'll make the jokes and all that stuff, and it is still fucking wrong as we understand it. Now they didn't fucking know better in a lot of respects, and the other thing is at least.
Well, to be clear, it's not like he had a relationship with her or whatever. It's
No.
just he had a bit of an obsession with her in the back of his mind.
But we don't even know if it was necessarily sexual. We don't know if it was marriage. It may have just been the way that CE fucking described it in the thing I put in side chat, that she was just so virtuous that nobody could like see her that way. That she was just such a pure spirit that's just how like nobody could envision her with a husband and all that stuff. So that like they, regardless of like how they interpret this, whether it is multiple layered and it means Mary and it means Beatrix, like I don't think this would be like the way.
I take it back. I maligned him unfairly. They were the same age. So they were, in fact, when they first met, they were both 9. She dies at 25, though, and so after she dies, he's able to fantasize in any way he wants about how virtuous that she was, right? And so all of that virtue that he's imagining for her, what's the old saying? You either die young or you live long enough to be the villain, or whatever. So life.
Yeah, it's you either die the hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Right, exactly. So she dies before the world could corrupt her in a particular way. And so she becomes... I guess the reason why people associate him as a dirty old man in this is that she dies, so she's perpetually 25, right? Whereas by the time he writes this, he's considerably older than that. But he's still dealing with the Beatrice of his memory from his youth.
Wait a minute, hold on.
Yeah.
And he knew her as young as 9.
He only met her twice.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Yes, I remember that now. Yeah.
Yeah, I had to go look it up because I was
right.
like,
So he's able
why it
to
was
make
creepy.
up.
It was an obsession about an abstract as opposed to the literal person because he only had 2 occasions, and they didn't meet when they were 9. The 2 periods were separated by 9 years. The first time they met was 14. Second time, just before she died.
Right. So probably the 14-year-old her is what he constantly has in his mind. That's probably when the obsession starts.
Yeah.
And he never acts on it because he really never got to know her all that well. I think we've all had that. What is it, Charlie Brown? Doesn't Charlie Brown have that one girl that he's constantly obsessed with?
Lucy.
I don't even think she has a name. I think she's called the brown-haired girl or something like that.
Oh God, it's been so long since I watched this stuff. I don't remember this one.
Hold on. No, the red-haired girl. Yeah. The little red-haired girl is who she's called. He's constantly obsessed with her, but I don't think we really get to see her much in any of the strips. But he's absolutely obsessed with her, right? I think so. Beatrice obviously is that. And if the Beatrice of his memory is somebody he met once at 14 and then didn't meet again until she was dying, probably in his memory she's still 14, right? Yeah. That's who he's thinking of as he imagines this.
Well,
and he can put everything onto her because he doesn't know her.
Well, but as I was saying though, even though this does add a little different layer, it also to intimate intimate intention isn't there either. He may have called her the love of his life, but I've heard people who are... I've heard people who are entirely chaste say that about people. So that's a concept that goes a little bit different. It would change the meaning in my eyes, how he viewed her, because at least in the little bit of research I was able to do this week, well, I did see that accusation by a lot of non-Catholic fucking half-ass fucking undergrad scholars, a vast
Sorry, I'll be right back.
No problem. A vast majority of the people that like he was not interested in her for marriage. It was the love of her life because of the purity, and other people wrote of her purity as far as like behavior and stuff like that. And she did go to the grave unmarried at 25, which would be almost unheard of in this time period. 25, she's fucking middle-aged in this time period. Like that, like
yeah.
she would have been the equivalent of a spinster, at 25 and unmarried.
Yeah, 25 unmarried in 13th century. Yeah.
Like I'd have to look up the exact life expectancy, but I think it was like 60.
Well, that's going to depend heavily on where you're measuring from, because like life expectancy from birth is often very different from like life expectancy from 5, just because of how many people died in early childhood. But yeah, I would say probably mid 60s is likely.
Articles. Cite this one. Okay, without digging further, it's going to take me too long to find the exact answer, but like the quick answer is 50 to 60 according to Quora and Reddit. Google Scholar, yeah. I'd have to dig further because it wasn't in the abstract of the most cited one, which means I have to actually go into the data. Too long to do live on stream, and doesn't overall connect to what we're talking about. Now, going back to what we're saying, I will still go with this is a creepy aspect of his behavior. This is, again, goes back into a lot of what he is writing as a self-condemnation and admonishment for his failings, or what he perceives to be his failings. So to me, he calls her the love of his life, and it is also an admonishment of the life he did not pursue, the things that he wanted but didn't have, like Virgil, which he couldn't have had because Virgil was dead before he was ever alive, so on and so forth. So it's like this is like a lot of these become self-reflectory images that he then juxtaposes onto social commentary and religious commentary. Now, since Despy technically read the next two tier sets as well, I'll go back and reread them just because it's been so far. O Lady of Virtue, thou alone through whom the human race exceedeth all contained within heaven that has the lesser circles, so grateful unto me is thy commandment to obey. If 'twere already done, were late, no farther needst thou up to me thy wish. But the cause tell me why thou dost not shun the here descending down into the center, from the vast place thou burnest to return to. Since thou wouldest fain so inwardly discern, briefly will I relate, she answered me, why I am not afraid to enter here. Of those things only should one be afraid, which have the power of doing others harm. Of the rest, no, because they are not fearful. God is in his mercy such created me that misery of yours attains me not, nor flame assails me of this burning. A gentle lady is in heaven who grieves at this impediment to which I send thee, so that stern judgment there above is broken. In her entreaty she besought Lucia, and said, thy faithful one stands in of thee, and unto thee I recommend him. Now, when we go to the commentary by Longfellow is talking about Saint Lucia, the emblem of enlightening grace. So this is, you know, what as he's bringing this up, he's talking about the grace that is being sought in this journey. She is entreating to Virgil to go and bring this enlightenment to Dante. That is a important point, and I think when we get to the next part about Rachel will be interesting. I wish that Rich was still. Oh, Rich is back. Okay. So we just got to where he talks about she besought Lucia, that then the faithful one sends and stands unto thee, and unto thee I recommend him. Like this is getting into again the way that they are, why they are not afraid, who is sending them. And actually, with the wording here, I actually think that Despy has some credence that Mary is the one sending Beatrice, or that Beatrice and Mary are essentially interchangeable, depending on what tercet we're in.
I mean, it does seem fairly clear. It does seem fairly clear when he says, "A gentle lady is in heaven who grieves at this impediment to which I send thee, so that stern judgment there above is broken." That seems fairly clear, at least in my naive reading of this, that Beatrice here is referring to Mary. And so yeah, it's kind of what Rich was talking about earlier, the inverted intercession where Mary has sent down sent down an angelic figure in Beatrice to intercede with Virgil to assist Dante in his struggle.
Yeah, I think this is the value of saints just broadly, right? Like, this is why we have so many intercessions in Catholicism, because it's really like, in a way, like memetics, an idea passes from one person to the next, to the next, to the next. So you can imagine this as like starting with God, and then you go to Mary, and then you go to Beatrice, and then you go to Virgil, and then you get to Dante. And each one is an intercession that was maybe requested, or you could say requested or inspired in the case of God. Yeah, exactly. And so this makes sense, right? Because if you believe in Scripture, for instance, as being something that's inspired by God, but is written through the hand of man, already you have that sort of similar chain of causality for ideas. And so, there's just more links in the chain here. So we have God, potentially Mary. We're still like trying to suss out whether or not Mary is at the literal level or just at the metaphorical level, but maybe she is literal as well here. But if that's the case, then it would be God, Mary, Beatrice.
Actually,
Virgil.
it would. Lucia seems to be in the the line as well between Mary and Beatrice.
Well, but
yeah, that's right. Right. Yeah, that's right.
But Saint Lucia, emblem of enlightening grace. That's what I'm saying. With the way he layers all of this, it could be all of it or none of it, and we are literally putting things there that even he didn't mean.
Yeah, but at the literal level, it looks like this is like just a series of intercessors, like going down, like in a sort of hierarchical order. Surely there's a diagram of this somewhere. Let's see. It would be God, Mary, Lucia,
Beatrice, Rachel, and then Rachel is
because
listed in the list.
She's listed, but it's saying that
because
Lucia,
it's in the order, it may find him the image he's looking for. That's it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, apparently they are referred to as the three blessed women, which I guess that's what they're referred to in the text here as well.
Lucia, Rachel, and Beatrice, or Mary?
it is, hold on, it is Mary, Lucia, and Beatrice.
Okay. Yeah, because it says Lucia comes to the place where Beatrice is sitting with the ancient Rachel, being the Rachel from the Old Testament. I can't remember the specific story, but anyways, but it seems that Rachel's presence here is largely incidental.
Well, yeah, like I said, I just listed it so you could find the image, because like usually if you put the keywords that aren't necessarily meant to be there but in context could be mistaken, somebody else has searched it in that same way, and it can lead you to the right website or image.
Yeah, Lucia is Saint Lucy of Syracuse, a Christian martyr closely associated with sight and vision. So this is extending the metaphor of sight being the thing that memory records, right? Mm-hmm. So it makes sense that she would be there. And yes, according to this professor from the University of Texas, the uppermost link in that chain would have to be Mary, right? He says, in this case, Virgil explains in Canto II that he was summoned to Dante's aid by Beatrice, who was herself summoned by Lucia at the request of a woman able to alter the judgment of heaven. So that's the ultimate intercessor, right? Which would be Mary. Yes. Can only be Mary, the Virgin Mother of Jesus, according to Dante's faith. So yeah, that's the link so far. So Sensei called it. I'm going to send this to him. Be pleased. Let's see.
Yeah, I'll be stoked. And like I said, I hadn't read that because I understand the gendering that we have done upon Triune that has since been removed, and you and I have talked about that before, of the masculine, the neutral, and the feminine all being within the Triune, whereas the feminine was the Holy Spirit. Like it could just as well have been when she was assumed into heaven, that was the place she took. But due to the misogyny of church fathers early on, that gets ignored now.
I mean, Dante seems to have a very high opinion of women, especially if the characterization of Beatrice is to, be the measure.
No, I absolutely
so I'm going
agree.
To send this.
Yeah. I just hadn't thought of, and I should have, especially considering, you are and I was a Mary worshipping pagan.
Right. Let's see.
I should have put that causal link in there, but I guess I was a bad Catholic even before I quit.
Sensei confirmed. Okay, I'm just sending it right now. I don't know. He may be listening still, whatever he's doing. And if he is, then
he's
Sensei, go check the DM. Okay, so good. So that is the causal chain. So it's been so long since I've read it that I forgot all of that. Like I remembered Beatrice asked Virgil, but I didn't remember about Lucia. Or St. Lucy.
Okay, so now either you or Ian can
or anybody above that.
At the end of that quote, starting with Lucia, foe of all crew. Oh wait, no, it's starting with starting with Beatrice, said she. Is where I left off.
Beatrice, said she, the true praise of God. Why succourest thou not him who loved thee so? For thee he issued from the vulgar herd. Dost thou not hear the pity of his plaint? Dost thou not see the death that combats him? Beside that flood, where ocean has no vaunt. Never were persons in the world so swift to work their weal and to escape their woe as I, after such words as these were uttered. Came hither downward from my blessed seat, confiding in thy dignified discourse which honors thee, and those who've listened to it. I don't know if you want me to go on from there.
Yeah, go two more, because I think that's...
maybe just one more.
Oh,
okay. After she thus had spoken unto me, weeping, her shining eye she turned away, whereby she made me swifter in my coming.
Isn't that just like a woman?
Damn it, Rich, you're going to get us canceled. No.
But I mean, this
I think
seems...
it's fair to have old-fashioned interpretations of this particular work.
But I mean, this to me seems again naive reading. You know, it was Beatrice saying, basically in more modern parlance, you know, after she talked to me, like her words were so moving that I basically got up and got right. She's basically just saying how moving Lucia's words were and how quickly she went to the task. Requested of her after hearing those words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's that, but it's also the weeping. There is always a significance in, especially this particular time period's point when they bring up the weeping of women, because to them this is actually a symbolic point. Weeping, her shining eyes she turned away. This is not just important how quickly she moved. It was how important she took it. That this was of such vital importance that it caused her to weep even in the contemplation of it. They do this in the Bible constantly, but they also do this in a lot of contemporary works. Where the particular, not heroine, but particular female figure within the book will or poem will actually weep about a particular emotion, good or bad, to delineate the intensity thereof.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I think this is actually talking about Lucia weeping in the request to Beatrice.
I think that's kind of immaterial to the point. It's the importance of it.
Okay.
It's the signifier, which, as we understand today, is fucking misogynistic as hell. But they used it constantly as like a amplifier within stories at this point in history.
Okay.
It's almost like adding an adjective of very onto something.
Yeah.
Just their poetic way of doing it. And yes, this kind of goes more into what Rich is talking about, these intercessions, that it was not only just a chain, but a chain that carried the importance all the way from Mary on to, Lucia. That's, I don't know, man, like, the way I interpret that by a modern lens is far less charitable than I should, unfortunately. Because to me, that's like, this isn't love at this point. This is, almost possessiveness. And that just, modern lens makes it come out much less beautiful than the old way.
I also like, it speeds me down. Okay, again, I'm reading Dorothy's translation here, but speeds me down, trusting to my purpose dear to thee and to thy golden rhetoric. So basically, the reason she goes to Virgil is because she needs to use Virgil's rhetoric to work its magic on Dante. In other words, we will hear a lot later on about how the cardinal virtues aren't enough. Like the reason Virgil can't leave hell under ordinary circumstances is because he lacks the holy virtues of faith, hope, and charity. But because he's so virtuous in the cardinal virtues, rhetoric being a part of that, it's interesting to see a reference here that sometimes the holy virtues aren't enough. Sometimes you need those cardinal virtues. Because faith, love, and charity are the highest virtues, but they still need to make use of those more earthly virtues, which Virgil has in spades.
Yeah. to me, this was Dante trying to express, social commentary-wise, that neither side had the right answer. It's the combination thereof. That this whole, it has to be faith, it has to be this, it has to be that. It's everybody's getting it wrong. It's all of it.
It sort of reminds me of the argument between Plato and Aristotle, right? Where Plato is interested in the truth and only in the truth, and he wants to arrive at the truth in a pure way, and therefore he disregards rhetoric. He thinks that it's something that cannot be trusted and that you must be distant from. He associates it with the sophists of the day. And Aristotle makes the argument that no, it's because the sophists exist that we must also have the art of rhetoric, so that we can convince people of things that are true once we arrive at those things. And so, of course, with Plato's mouthpiece is often the character of Socrates. Socrates is himself killed because he doesn't use rhetoric to defend himself. And Aristotle seems to think that was a mistake. And so he wants to master the art of rhetoric as well as all of those other arts, because as well as philosophy, because he believes that philosophy alone isn't enough. You have to then be able to persuade people at a more base level. And I think that seems to be his argument with Plato, is that Plato doesn't respect rhetoric enough to study rhetoric in order to spread his philosophy far and wide.
Well, that's why
and I think here it's
try to attribute Plato as a pre-Christian Christian. Whereas to me,
quite often.
Whereas to me, I am very much more Aristotelian on this aspect.
Well, this is the project of the saints, especially starting with Augustine, right? Who wants to use Greek philosophy in a way that's compatible with Christianity. So he sort of merges them together. But here you have a very similar project, right? It's in my mind, you can cast Beatrice in the role of Plato, where she lives in truth, and she really doesn't have these rhetorical skills because she's, for whatever reason, she didn't live long enough in life, or she spent too much time in heaven and now just lives in truth alone and isn't really capable of getting to the earthly level and persuading people of things. But Virgil does still have those skills, and potentially, at least according to Dante, seems to have those skills more than any other human who's ever lived. And so she wants to leverage those skills to save Dante.
Yeah, and this is why, as I point out, I am far more in the Aristotelian side of this, because to me, what this is apologetics. This is, we will say what we need you to say to make you believe what we want you to believe, as opposed to being able to show you the truth of it.
Right, because if you show somebody the truth, the truth alone might not be persuasive. So you have to employ rhetorical skill in order to make the truth palatable, able to be consumed. I think Virgil here is Aristotle, in my analogy. I don't mean that. Yeah. I don't mean literally that he had Aristotle in mind here. I'm just saying it's a very similar project.
In the allegory, this would be the comparable. To me, that is, but it is.
Aristotle is in the Castle of Light.
It is the exploitation of Aristotelian logic to push somebody to a Platonic point, which would be essentially the first form of apologetics.
Right.
And you know my feeling on apologetics.
Yeah, sure. No, well, of course. Although there are apologetics in this because he is a believing Christian. But, I do think that he understands that there are levels of truth and levels of worth, and we're starting to understand ways in which when we get to the Castle of Light, it'll be far more clear that he greatly admires these people who, because they are pagans, because they are before Christ, they cannot have the three holy virtues because we can only get those through the divine. But they have every other virtue that it's possible for a human to have without the divine.
Yeah, as faith is
the Castle of Light is where you probably would like to be.
The Castle of Light may be where I may like to be if this version of hell existed and version of the afterlife existed. However, when it comes right down to it, because of my beliefs, I would not be there. Because the simple fact is, to me, faith is auto-deceptive hypnosis.
Well, they don't have this kind of faith either, right? Which is why they're limited to, at best, being in the Castle of Light.
Well, I understand that, but my point is
but
not,
we'll
not
get
only
to that
do I not have it, I don't want it,
right?
And I view it not as a virtue, but as quite literally the most dishonest position you can hold intellectually.
Yeah, we'll find this later. We'll get to this when we get to it. But Virgil will at some point make it clear, or Dante will. I can't quite remember that Virgil, like all of the denizens of hell, simply doesn't believe that he's capable of it, that he's worthy of it, and it's his own lack of hope that prevents him from being able to leave hell. I think he would like
to, his own lack
but
of
he
faith.
doesn't. He can't. Yeah, well, lack of faith, and also, to a degree, I said this last week, lack of imagination. Right, that he cannot imagine that there's any pathway for him to heaven.
No, he can't imagine it because he doesn't have faith. The fact that he doesn't.
The irony for yes, of course he. Yeah, I know that. That's my point. Is that he doesn't have any of the three holy virtues, right? Faith is one of those, but he also doesn't have hope, and he doesn't have love. So that's why he can't do. But it's hope, in this instance, that he would that would be able to open the door to allow him to walk out of hell. But he lacks it. That's why the sign even says, when you get there, abandon all hope, ye who enter here. So since he entered there, Virgil abandoned hope a long time ago.
No, and I understand this, but
or never had it.
More my point is it's the faith that is lacking that is changing all of it. The other two are dependent on the first. The hope would come with faith, because you can believe something contrary to the evidence, contrary to where all of the observable fucking facts of the world around you are going to lead you to conclude. That is where that hope comes from. It is auto-deceptive. It is self-hypnosis. It is psyching yourself up, which is why, I'm sorry, I don't think I'd even get there, because every part of the subset of the three holy virtues are contingent on that. And to me, it is not a virtue at all. It is quite literally the antithesis of a virtue. This would be as base as a fucking position as you can hold, because it is, I believe...
Wait, what isn't?
Faith.
Faith?
Faith is not a virtue.
Oh, you're taking Lethe's position here.
No, this is a position... No, he holds that faith doesn't exist, or that faith is a lie. I hold that faith
is folly.
Faith is auto-deceptive, and we know this because we can actually track the human brain and actually do experiments on this, where if you talk to a imaginary person for long enough, it doesn't matter, eventually that imaginary person will start talking back to you. This is an auto-deceptive faith.
Sure. Yeah.
We have done this very horrible fucking versions of these experiments before we had better ethics on this shit. And yeah, this is something that humans do in isolation. And if you believe you are isolated from the rest of your community because you lack this faith, and you start praying to this imaginary position, whether it is real or not, even if they never utter a word back to you, you will think they have. And
by the way, line 78, the heaven whose circles narrowest run. In other words, the circle
closest
that
circle
is
to Earth,
the fastest circling around the Earth. In this case, it would be the moon. So that's what they were referencing there, was everything within the circle of the moon, which would be, of course, Earth.
Well, the moon and the sun, because they're in the same circle, but yeah.
Are they the same circle?
Well, the same portion.
No, I think the sun
of
is the sun circle.
In the original interplay of this idea, the sun and the moon are in the same firmament. That's why they are the same size in the sky, because they had no relativistic understanding of perspective. To understand that the reason they appeared the same size in the sky during eclipses was because of distance, and rather than them actually being the same size.
I thought the sun was its own sphere. Yeah. So the smallest sphere is the moon. The next one is Mercury. The next one is Venus, and then the next one is the sun.
Yeah.
Then Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, fixed stars, and Prima Mobile. So those are different spheres for Dante.
But it depends.
He'll make it like explicit when it gets to Paradiso.
I mean, yeah, I forget that, but the more I was just saying, the way that it was perceived by the religious, where they were the same sphere. This is the scientific who perceived it as the other.
I just mean the cosmology in the comedy.
Yeah, and that's why I was kind of getting into it. The religious understood it as the same sphere. The scientific understood it as different spheres, but they were still wrong because of the geocentric understanding that they had at that time.
Yeah, and I think for Dante, he wanted to be as scientific as possible in this. So yeah. I don't think he saw a difference between the way science and religion viewed it. I think he just thinks it's all truth. So, I think he allows science to make changes to the cosmology because it's not going to contradict his faith necessarily. These are all ways of explaining how God orders the universe. And if we find out something different, as long as it doesn't contradict something else we know to be true, then I think he'll accept the change. And in this case, he's taking it from Averroes, and Averroes apparently puts the sun there.
Well, no, more what I was just getting at is he seems to delineate between the two. Because there are times when he uses this more scientific layout, and there are times in verse that he will reference it from the theological perspective, like he's trying to juxtapose the difference between the two. That's all. That's what I was meaning, is he tries to show both. And at least here, I would take it from the theological perspective of it, of the sun and the moon and the firmament, and the stars outside the firmament.
Which, by the way, the tercet starting with line 91, but by nature, by God's mercy is made, such as your calamities cannot no wise shake. Like the fires of hell cannot do anything to bother Beatrice. She can pity him for being in hell, but his plight or anything that's happening in hell cannot shake the foundations of where she is. That sort of reminds me, because she's knows the Inklings quite well and refers to Lewis a lot. C.S. Lewis talks in The Great Divorce about how heaven is like a place where it's unchanging. So if you were to go to heaven, and in his depiction of it, if you're standing on the grass will poke into your feet like needles, because the grass will not bend to your feet. Your feet must bend to the grass, because heaven is truth, and truth cannot be bent in that way. And it's the same thing here with Beatrice, right? Beatrice is now under no threat.
But doesn't that contradict our teachings as Catholics of truth cannot contradict truth?
Well, no, that's the point. Your feet are not truth. The blades of grass are.
But the argument there, truth cannot contradict truth, is that the Bible, the Word, these things, no matter how much we hold them dear, they bend to the reality real observable universe around us.
I see what you mean. Yeah. No, but they don't, because it's if you read closely, truth cannot contradict truth. And if you read Augustine when he's on Genesis, he's not saying that Scripture is what has to bend. He's saying that your interpretation of Scripture is what has to bend, right? So if we are to regard Genesis as true, Augustine says, then we have to see that it's compatible with other things that we know to be true. And if something that we know to be true contradicts our interpretation of the Bible, then we've misinterpreted the Bible. But the Bible itself isn't what bends; it's our interpretation of it that bends.
Well,
in other words, we misunderstood
it
from the beginning, and we have to like.
The misinterpretation would be the person who said that it is your feet that bend the blade of grass. That's the misinterpretation.
Right, the blade of grass has to,
and that's why I'm saying
be adapted by us.
Yeah, wouldn't that contradict? Wouldn't that contradict truth? Contradict truth? That interpretation that was given, not the Bible.
Well, no, right. Only if you think that the feet are as true as the blades of grass, but the feet are not true is the point that Lewis is trying to make.
I know,
we have to adapt to the blades of grass.
But Lewis was a creationist, and therefore was trying to, and more specific. Yes.
I mean, I believe you. I just didn't know either way.
Yeah, there's a reason that apologists love quoting C.S. Lewis, because C.S. Lewis came up with the 3 L's problem of God. You know, the liar, the con man, the madman. The creationist, like, absolutely.
He's either a liar, a lunatic, or a lord. Yeah,
the 3 L's. I went with the more modern interpretation, and this is my point. Like he was a creationist and a presuppositionalist. That's why apologists like William Lane Craig and all them love quoting him. Because like people like, oh, you don't write The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and all this magic if you're really a Christian. Well, that's because of your 1900s interpretation of this shit, as opposed to, you know, like the way most people viewed it for the majority of history.
And not to mention, like, it was explicitly meant to be an allegory, so like,
Aslan was supposed to be Jesus.
Yeah.
So while I understand the principle, the interpretation in and of itself is an apologetic, and therefore, by the words of that interpretation of that, and what we are taught as Catholics, it would be wrong. It is.
So I understand there's some tension there, but he's like, at one point he was asked about this by Bernard Ackworth, and his response was, "I am neither attacking nor defending evolution. I believe that Christianity can still be believed, even if evolution is true. This is where you and I differ. Thinking as I do, I can't help by regarding your advice that I henceforth include arguments against evolution in all my Christian apologetics as a temptation to fight the battle on what is really a false issue, and also on terrain very
I just said he was a
for the only weapon
creationist. I didn't say he was a young Earth creationist. There's a difference between those two.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, there are a lot of Christians who believe that God uses evolution or whatever to like
theistic evolutionists. Yeah.
He's agnostic on that idea, right? Like he doesn't claim to know whether or not we evolved. He says that it's not a threat to Christian faith, and therefore he doesn't like ponder it.
Well, he does later. That's what I'm saying. Like, there's a lot of contention.
He may later. Yeah,
and that's why there's a lot of contention on it. But he is an apologist, and he is a creationist. He's not a young Earth creationist. He's an old Earth creationist and a theistic evolutionist. But he was an apologist, regardless of these facts.
He's also not a scientist, right? Like his writings, to the degree that they were,
that's what he called himself.
His writings, to the degree that they were great. And I think they were. I actually love Lewis myself.
Yeah, no
but
argument.
it's speaking at the moral level where he's amazing, and I think that's maybe why he avoids talking about evolution, because I think he thinks it's irrelevant to the moral argument of the faith.
And on that, you may be right. I wouldn't want to intimate his intentions. But what I will say is,
now I'm pretty sure he wouldn't want us to worship evolution as some sort of moral guide to what humans should do. And I think we've seen in the 20th century what happens when we start to assign morality to evolution.
No,
I think
that's an apologetic.
Fascism
too.
Was a
No. You were about to derail this onto something, because that is an absolute.
No. Yeah, that's fine. I'm just saying. I think we all agree that we can't take our moral cues from evolution. And I
don't. I absolutely disagree with that, because quite literally, our morality came from our evolution. Every bit of it.
Our morality of survival of the fittest?
No, that's not. First of all, that's a misunderstanding of what survival of the fittest means, because people don't understand what fitness means in biology. Second of all, it has to do with, our moral imperative as a communal species is absolutely fucking driven by our evolution. We can prove this. This is
So
something we can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt.
So this is one of those areas that will probably distract us in the clip, but I'll just say, if you go back to the turn of the century, it was people wanting to take their moral cues from evolution, social Darwinism. That whether or not you think that's a misunderstanding of it, that is their desire, right? And then you have people like, if you read the Cross of Gold speech, for instance. This is a person who wants to reject evolution and also wants like moral, like social welfare state to take care of people. And the argument against him at the time, popularly, came from the social Darwinists who said, no, we just have to let people settle at their own level.
Yes,
but we can have this conversation.
Yeah, these are the straw men, because this is not this isn't even what fucking Darwin starts. Social Darwinism or Darwinism, that is a so misused term that people fucking use constantly to create these straw men. That even you just repeated one. That is absolutely a myth, just 100% a myth.
Yeah.
Social Darwinism does not dictate that, nor was fascism dictated by evolution. Quite literally, fucking fascism was led by a fucking madman who fucking believed in a different form of evolution called Lysenkoism. He believed in that's a totally
we can talk about that off
that's a total.
We can even do that like when we're done here.
Yeah.
It would have been Lamarckism.
Or Lamarckian evolution. Lysenko was
Lamarckian evolution.
Put it in place. Yeah.
Yep. But just to kind of cap it off, like Darwinism on the human level speaks about communities, not individuals. So any attempt to create a social Darwinism completely misunderstood Darwin's theory to begin with.
Yeah, like it was a straw man.
Well, Darwin himself rejected social Darwinism.
Yes, because
exactly.
But Darwin didn't think that we should take morality from evolution.
No,
he didn't think that
well, we're not saying we take. We're not saying to take morality from evolution. We're saying that from an evolutionary viewpoint, the morality that we have today is a result of evolution. It is a result of those behaviors within a communal species that leads to the greatest benefit of the community. Yeah. So we're not saying that we should interpret evolution or interpret our morals from evolution, simply that the morals that we currently have are a result of evolution, but conflating those two things leads to some vast misunderstandings that cause people
misunderstood it too. They conflated them.
Exactly.
That's why
I agree that.
Go ahead.
I agree that morality evolves. Like that's
but we can track this back all the way through Homo habilis. Homo erectus, Canyanthropus, Canyanthropus platii. Like, we actually can track this through different species where morality, care, communal living actually can be traced through the fossil record, where we have people who live for decades without teeth, or with broken limbs, or with deformities, which could only work with the communal living and moralistic aspect of societal and tribal living. We can track this back before Homo sapiens evolved. This has nothing to do.
Especially right, but I don't think that. I think the point being made here, and it's the same point that Aristotle would make, is that. If he were to know about the theory of evolution, he would incorporate it into this idea that Plato's forms are informed by our experience of the world, not the other way around. But I think he wouldn't. I think he wouldn't say, I'm not sure if Dante would say, to try to bring it back to the poem, that any of this is morality. That we like. it would be different to say that like evolution is an inherently moral process. But I think it's fair to say that evolution is something that would certainly, I mean, everything comes as a result of our evolution in the world, because otherwise, like, we wouldn't be here. So to that extent, even morality is something that's involved. I don't think anyone can deny that.
No,
but speaking from Lewis's point of view,
but when we start talking about people who think that morality comes from an ultimate source as opposed to the evolution of a species over multiple generations, those are contradictory and mutually exclusive points. One is saying that this morality is given by an outside actor. One is it is generated.
This would take us on a big rabbit hole that has nothing to do with the text. But I'll just say that I do think that there are certain principles that we discover that we consider to be universal principles. And near as we can tell, those universal principles are the same regardless of evolutionary process, right? So for instance, math, right? Like 2 + 2 would be 4, no matter what evolutionary process you want to do.
Because this is a misunderstanding of like that. Math is descriptive, not prescriptive. Morality is a prescriptive action.
Right, but it's apparently descriptive of something that doesn't depend on our evolution, right, to exist.
But also doesn't.
So, like, even the phenomenologist will say. So, like, even the phenomenologist will say that there are aspects of experience that are unchangeable, that you can't. Well, we'll talk about it after.
Yeah, well, because the reason I get into this is because that also has nothing to do with the morality that we're talking about. Yes, math connects differently. Yes, that wouldn't connect to evolution.
I just mean to say that for Dante here, he seems to be saying that the truth that Beatrice is rooted in because she lives in heaven is unchangeable and unaffected by the fires of hell.
I know.
Hell is always changing, constantly morphing.
But I was talking about your commentary when you said the blade of grass. That's how we got onto this tangent. And I said that would contradict but it reminds me of the blade of grass within Catholics because of the fact that interpretation that you brought up as a commentary was a misrepresentation of that teaching, of it goes the other way. Like, it was literally a reversal of our Catholic teaching. It was a Catholic apologetic. That's all.
Sure, but here, okay, my nature, by God's mercy, is made such as your calamities can no wise shake. So she's firmly rooted in heaven, even though she's come to visit hell to talk to Virgil. She cannot be shaken by being in hell because she's firmly rooted in truth. Yeah, well, and also truth. She's like, she's in a place of unshakable truth.
Yeah, and
so she cannot be. That's all I'm. So
yeah, it was only I'm the just commentary saying that, this reminds that we got off on the tangent because of
this. I'm just saying this reminds me of the C.S. Lewis stuff, in part. So this is commented on too by Dorothy, who knows the Inklings. Some say she is an Inkling, and she references. Okay, I didn't see this part of it, but she references the Great Divorce here, where the subject is handled in a very illuminating way. So she's making the same comparison to the Great Divorce. I just didn't read as far. It would have been easier if I just said that from the beginning. But the action of pity will live forever. The passion of pity will not. Yes. Okay. So anyway, but so I think he is saying the same thing that Lewis is saying. To the degree that you're disagreeing with Lewis, you're also disagreeing with Dante here, which is fine. But here, Dante seems to be saying that the truth of heaven is absolute and unchangeable and will not be affected by the fire.
My question before we went off on the tangent because of the mention of fascism and the straw man there was that contradicts Catholic teaching even in his time period of truth cannot contradict truth.
What do you mean? Like,
because we know that the grass does not make our feet bend, and we know that's not true.
I don't think Dante knows that's not true. And I personally, I don't believe it either. I think 2 + 2 is 4, and we can make all kinds of...
That's my point. We understand that was the misinterpretation. That was my whole point, that we then went off on all these tangents because you wanted to defend the misinterpretation. Like, that was the whole point. This is the misinterpretation.
Which all right, we'll talk about that.
No, this is at the poem. That
this will be fun for whoever is editing this.
No, the truth bends this. That's my point. The truth there is not on changing to Beatrice. That's not what this is. The misunderstanding here. The grass bends the feet. It is that she is so firm within that faith, that truth, that she is protected from these calamities. It's not that she cannot be moved by them. She is protected from them.
Right, because what she's being protected with is heaven, right? The truth of heaven.
Yeah, but it's because she doesn't have the negative. She doesn't have any of the things that would allow these calamities to befall her either. She is without those sins. So it is the truth of without the sin, you cannot be affected by the calamities, not the fact that she is being brought from heaven. It is because she meets all of the prerequisites for heaven that these calamities are unable to affect her, much like Jesus was unable to be affected by the calamities.
Maybe, but she had to hone those abilities, right? Like, presumably she had to spend some time in purgatory before she made it to heaven. I'm not exactly sure if he goes into that, but that'll be interesting to know.
Oh yeah, I don't remember
how did
that
Beatrice
part either.
get into heaven? Did she go instantly to heaven, or
if
did she spend some time in purgatory?
If she did, she would have had none of the negatives. In the way he describes her in the very beginning of this canto, she didn't have any of the negatives that would allow her to be affected by hell or purgatory.
Well, she doesn't have those negatives now. Like at the time that she visits
when you go
Virgil,
back up to C.E. Norton, where he's talking about her as a first love. This most gentle lady, of whom there had been discourse in what precedes, reached such favor among the people that when she passed along the way, persons ran to see her. He is talking about the real person in real life having all of these blessed virtues before her death, not after.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't know. What I'm saying is I'm not yet aware of how she gets to heaven. Like, I don't know if Dante even goes into it.
I forget too, but if she went straight to heaven, that would mean she couldn't have been affected by hell anyways.
Right, or she died young enough to not be corrupted in any way. There are several people who go straight to heaven without traveling purgatory first. She may have been one of them. I'm just saying I'm not yet aware that.
But that's what I was trying to get at is like that portion. It is that interpretation that I disagree with because it contradicts the Catholic teaching that preceded this by almost 1,000 years.
Wait, which one?
Truth cannot contradict truth comes from 500s.
Yes, I mean. That particular title was written in the 90s, but yeah, I know what you mean. You're talking about Augustine.
The concept comes from Augustine in the 4th century.
Yeah, I would say that there's a few steps in there that you're missing, but we'll talk about that after stream.
Yeah, okay.
Because I don't want to distract too much.
Yeah, we have gotten off on a tangent because of that. That's
yeah.
It's just, sorry, when somebody says that, it drives me nuts because that is something that people say that has never once been true about, like, how all of that horrible portion of history got started. No, that was started by another portion of the religion. Like, it had nothing to do with, evolution is leading this. No. We'll get into that later. But, yeah, like, that one bothers me a lot. Because it is something that leads to people like...
There's still more to be said about that.
Yeah,
we'll definitely talk about that outside of the context of Dante. But I just wanted to point out that here, like, I still think that he's making Lewis's argument in this stanza, and I do think that, I actually now have confirmed that Dorothy Sayers makes the same argument, that there's a link there between the Great Divorce and what's being claimed here in terms of the unshakableness of Beatrice because she's rooted in truth. But we'll hash that out.
Well, yeah, and the reason I had got into it so much is because of the simple fact that this is one of those things that has led to a lot of misunderstandings because it depends on what angle you come at the understanding from. If you are going to pull the apologetic interpretation, or the more literal, meaning literary interpretation of like how this should be read. Whereas like that was where Dante got it wrong, in my opinion, because to him
Lewis explains what he means by the blades of grass. By the way, he says that he read a science fiction story about a time traveler, and in this theory of time travel, you cannot change anything that's happened in the past. So he goes back in time, and like if he tries to open a door, it won't open. He has to wait until somebody opens the door and then follow them out.
Yeah, it's a
because nothing in the past can change as a result. So you can go to the past, but he's like a ghost.
Yeah,
because the past is written in stone.
Yeah, it's predeterminism and deterministic.
And that's what inspires Lewis to say, "Oh, yeah, God's truth is something that cannot be changed." So you can go to heaven, but when you get to heaven, you notice that you can't change anything. You can only let heaven change you. That's because of what he read in that sci-fi story. That was that sort of determinism is what he assigned to heaven, which seems to be what Dante is in this.
Also inferring
in 91.
No, yeah, like I said,
sorry?
That Dante is also inferring, and without
right.
the sci-fi story, and that's my point.
Right.
At least according to Catholic teachings, both are wrong.
No, I wouldn't say that, but I'll tell you why at a later point.
Yeah,
the reason I wouldn't say that is because I think there's a difference between the truth of the scripture and our interpretation of the truth. And it's always our interpretation of the truth, according to Catholic theology, that has to be reinterpreted and can be wrong.
And this,
but the truth itself,
I am no longer a Catholic.
Yeah, it's fine. I understand that. This is one of the reasons I don't proselytize. But I'm just saying that the Catholic belief today is that it's the interpretation of truth that we get wrong. Mm-hmm. It's and you can, like, our understanding of what is true is constantly being honed